The restaurant glowed golden. Wine glasses chimed to celebrate my daughter-in-law's new title. I stood at the host stand, my son right beside me. My daughter-in-law leaned in and said softly, sharp enough to slice the room open, "You were never part of this family." My son froze for a beat, then looked away. A few guests glanced over, some frowned, others pressed their lips in pity. I stood stunned, my face burning, my throat locked with shame. She added, dripping with sarcasm, "Remember to heat the leftovers in the fridge. Don't waste food." I couldn't breathe thinking of the shirt I'd just ironed for my son this morning and the down payment on the house that's in my name. I let out a bitter laugh. As the promotion party music swelled behind me, I stepped outside, letting the Santa Fe night wind rake across my burning cheeks. Inside, the pain cooled, making room for a frightening, icy clarity. I went home, took off the old earrings, opened the safe, and pulled out the file I'd quietly kept for 3 years. And by tomorrow she would learn that some dinners are never reheated and some mothers, when they fall silent, are just beginning to collect every debt. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Caroline Pierce, 63, living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in a cream-colored 2-story house I helped my son buy 3 years ago. That night, with the Mirador's music still echoing somewhere in my head, I sat at the kitchen chair, staring at my phone glowing with a text. "Suegra, remember to heat the leftovers in the fridge. Don't waste food." That line spelled out plainly meant, "Mother-in-law, remember to heat the leftovers in the fridge. Don't be wasteful." No, thank you. No exclamation point. Just a cold command, like I was the help. I looked around the kitchen where everything shined, every tile one I had picked myself. All of it bought from my savings after selling the small house where my husband died. Back then, Ethan told me, "Mom, sell the old house. It's too lonely by yourself. Come live with us, Madison and the kids. It'll be happier for everyone." I believed him. I believed I was stepping into peaceful years close to my grandkids, cared for and loved. But tonight, in this bright kitchen with that message blazing on my screen, I understood. I had never belonged to this house. I stood up and took a deep breath. No crying, no shouting. I began clearing the table, each motion like gathering the last pieces of my pride. Glasses rinsed, towels hung, stovetop wiped dry. I opened the fridge, looked at the half-eaten rotisserie chicken and a few cold fries, and chuckled. Madison was right, I wouldn't let them go to waste, just not the way she imagined. I walked to my room and turned on the desk lamp. On the shelf sat a photo of my husband, Robert, who passed 8 years ago from a stroke. "Robert," I whispered, "I kept my promise. I've taken care of our son like you wanted, but maybe it's time I take care of myself again." His eyes in the frame were as gentle as ever, and I knew he would understand. I opened the safe and took out a thick, brown-bound file with worn corners. Inside was everything: bank statements, transfer receipts, a photocopy of the purchase contract, and most important, the property deed with my name. Caroline Pierce, not Ethan's, not Madison's. I'd kept it that way as a just in case, a cautious habit after a lifetime in accounting. Only I and attorney Harold Kemp knew this. I opened my old laptop and plugged in a silver USB. On it were 17 recordings I'd saved over the past 3 years, conversations I overheard when they thought I wasn't there. Madison had told a friend, "It's like having a free maid. She cooks, cleans, and watches the kids." I don't even have to thank her. No translation needed, every word cut like a blade. I didn't delete them, I saved them because I knew I'd need them one day. Then I opened another folder. Photos of receipts, statements, transfers, every dollar I'd spent since selling my old house. Each image was proof of a sacrifice dismissed. I dragged them all into a new folder named Freedom. Then I wrote a handwritten letter to Ethan, each word heavy as stone. Ethan, my son, love does not mean letting others trample you. I've been silent too long, and in that silence I lost myself. I'm leaving not out of anger but to survive. On the table are papers you need to read carefully. This house, son, is not anyone's trophy, it is my blood and tears. Read closely before you use the word family. Mom. I set the letter neatly on the dining table beside a copy of the deed and a stack of financial statements. Light from the glass pendant lamp splashed across the page, making the last line, "Read closely before you use the word family," gleam like a warning. Before I left, I opened the closet and took the deep blue suitcase Robert and I carried on our last trip to Maine. Inside, I packed a few clothes, my journal, medications, and our old wedding ring still shining. Then I looked around the room. Everything was oddly quiet. I walked to the kitchen, pulled the house keys off the hook, and gripped them tight. Not because I was afraid to lose them, but because I knew these keys would be my final statement. I am the only one with the right to enter this house. I picked up my phone, scrolled through contacts, and called Martha Lane, my closest friend for over 20 years, the one woman I trust. Her voice trembled when she heard me. "Caroline? Goodness, your voice sounds odd. Is everything okay?" "Martha, I need a place to sleep tonight. Just one night. You always have a room here. Come over. I'll make coffee." Her voice felt like a warm blanket on a cold night. I ended the call, then dialed Avery Pierce, my niece, an attorney specializing in family property. I'd hinted at a few things before, but tonight I was clear. "Avery, can you meet me tomorrow morning? We need to talk about the house. Aunt Caroline, of course. I'll prep the documents. 9 a.m. at my office, okay?" "Okay. And Avery, don't tell anyone. This stays between us." The last call was to Harold Kemp, who handled the transfer paperwork 3 years ago. His voice was gravelly but steady. "Mrs. Pierce, your documents are fully valid. That house is in your name. No one can transfer it without your signature. Thank you, Harold." I just needed confirmation. I hung up and, for the first time in years, felt genuinely at peace. Before leaving, I walked through each room, touching the sofa, the family photos on the wall, the oven still carrying the scent of leftovers. I took it all in one last time, as if closing a chapter. The clock read 11:45 p.m. I rolled my suitcase to the door, locked up carefully, then pulled the key and slipped it into my purse. The click sounded dry but weighty. Outside, Santa Fe was hushed. I looked up at the sky washed in silver moonlight and took a long breath. The night wind carried the scent of lavender from the neighbor's yard. I started walking, each step lighter than the last, and inside I knew, tonight I'm not leaving to run, I'm leaving to take my life back. I turned to look at the house, the living room lights spilling through the window like empty eyes. I whispered, "Sleep well, my house." And as I stepped onto the sidewalk, my shadow stretched under the street lamp, carrying what remained, one mother, one suitcase, and the keys to reopen her own life. 3 years ago, I lost Robert, my husband, the man who shared over 40 years with me. He passed after 6 months fighting pancreatic cancer. Those 6 months were the longest, most painful, and quietest of my life. Every morning I made coffee and set an extra cup by mine, even though he'd never drink it again. The house in Albuquerque, where we raised Ethan, held only the tick of the wall clock and the chill seeping through the windows. I got used to waking early, drawing the curtains, and murmuring, "Good morning, Robert," with no one to answer. Robert's funeral was on a skin-biting February day. Everything slid by like a slow-motion film, the scent of white chrysanthemums, church music, Ethan's hands on mine without warmth. Madison stood next to my son in a black coat, face properly solemn but eyes far away. She laid a bouquet of roses on the casket and said softly, "Rest in peace, Mr. Pierce." It chilled me. Mr. Pierce, not Dad. a small distance, just enough to pull my heart down. After the funeral, I returned to our old 2-story place in Albuquerque. Every room was a memory. The burn mark on the kitchen table from the time Robert forgot the stove, the living room wall where Ethan once scribbled with crayons, the armchair where Robert read the paper every Sunday morning. Everything was there and empty. I cooked less, ate less, spoke less. Time sifted like sand through the old hourglass, and sometimes I wondered if the world might forget I still existed if I stayed still long enough. 2 weeks later, Ethan and Madison visited. They brought tulips and a lemon cake Madison called homemade, though I recognized the bakery taste. They sat in the living room, speaking gently, trying to sound caring. I knew they worried, but Ethan's eyes held something else, as if he'd come not just to see me, but to deliver a rehearsed line. "Mom," Ethan began, his voice soft but hesitant. "Madison and I bought a place in Edgewood near my work. It's big backyard and there's a room just for you. I don't want you living alone in this house forever." Madison smiled, her fingers lacing with his. "That's right, Mom. We're worried you're too lonely. Come live with us like a real family." I looked at them, my son and the younger woman he adored, and my dapped heart melted. After the funeral, loneliness had gnawed at me. The idea of living with them, hearing the kids laugh, cooking dinner every night, it made my eyes sting. "Are you sure?" I asked quietly. "I don't want to be a burden." Ethan grinned. "Burden? Mom, this house is your home too. We'll live together just like before." Those words, warm as they sounded, became the beginning of everything. Madison pulled out a printed packet saying they were short about $120,000 for the down payment to hold the house. "The market's insane," she said with an awkward laugh. "A little more, and we're there." Ethan looked at me, eyes pleading. "Mom, I know you have some savings. If you sell this house, we can cover the down payment. Then you move in with us, you won't have to worry about anything." I sat silent for a long time. This was the place where Robert and I started with nothing. Every corner was our effort, our memories, our breath. But looking at Ethan's eyes, hearing him say "we," I saw our family reborn after grief. So I nodded. 3 months later, the Albuquerque house sold. After expenses, I had exactly $120,000, just enough for the new place in Edgewood. I went to attorney Harold Kemp's office, the man Robert and I had worked with for years. He peered over half-rimmed glasses, voice firm. "Caroline, if all this money is yours, I recommend the house be in your name. You can transfer it to Ethan later, but for now, protect yourself." I was surprised. "But it's my son's house. I'm just helping them buy it." Harold gave a small, sad smile. "Trust me, Mrs. Pierce. Help, yes, but keep the paperwork clear. The world changes faster than people's hearts sometimes." I took his advice, and maybe that was the wisest decision I ever made. On signing day, Ethan read every clause. When Harold asked, "The temporary owner of record will be Caroline Pierce, correct?" Ethan answered immediately without hesitation. "That's fine, Mom. This house is ours." Ours. I remember those 2 words. They made me trust, relax, believe nothing could shake a bond between mother and son. The Edgewood house was brand new. White walls, red tile roof, green lawn. My room was downstairs, small but bright, with a window facing lavender. Madison said, "I picked this room for you so it's easier to get around." I was touched, not knowing the real reason was to keep me far from the primary bedroom upstairs. Move-in day, Madison cooked the first dinner. Pasta with mushroom cream sauce. She beamed, raising a glass of wine. "To a new beginning. Now we're a real family." I raised my glass, believing every word. I didn't know that wine was my farewell to an easy life. The first week, I helped unpack, decorate, arrange flowers. The second week, Madison asked me to watch the kids because she had to leave early for work. The third week, a chore list appeared on the fridge. Laundry, dishes, clean rooms, prep dinner, fold kids' clothes. I thought it was temporary help until they settled in, but temporary stretched month after month. Ethan was busy as an engineer, often home late. Madison climbed the banking ladder. And me, I became housekeeper, cook, babysitter, and sometimes a ghost. Mornings, I woke at 6 a.m., brewed coffee, made breakfast. Madison left in office wear with expensive perfume. Ethan tossed out, "Thanks, Mom," and vanished with her. Afternoons, I did laundry, cooked dinner, helped the kids with homework. At night, I heard them talk in their room, sometimes arguing, sometimes laughing, and I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, telling myself, I'm living with my family. I should be grateful. But gratitude thinned into fatigue, then into emptiness. No one asked if I slept well, ate anything, or needed an eye checkup. Only the chore list got refreshed weekly, written, in red marker, slapped onto the fridge. Once, I forgot fabric softener. Madison reminded me in a voice light as silk and just as cold, making my face burn. "Caroline, I know you're older, but the house still needs discipline, right?" I stayed quiet. I'd learned arguing only made things awkward for Ethan. I wouldn't do that to my son. Slowly, "we'll live together" turned into an unsigned contract, my payment in labor, theirs in indifference. I was no longer mom, but the person in charge of the house. I no longer had a room of my own, only the convenient downstairs space. I wasn't asked for opinions, only assigned tasks. Even so, I believed thought it would change when Madison eased up, when Ethan noticed, when the kids grew. I was wrong. It took 3 years to understand. I wasn't living with them. I was working for them in the very house I'd bought, with my own money. The trap I stepped into made no snap. It closed with sweet words, convincing smiles, and a seemingly harmless promise. We'll live together, I believed. And 3 years later, that belief became the weapon that hurt me most, yet also the thing that would help me win. Every morning the alarm rang at 5 a.m. I got up quietly, careful not to make the wood floors creak. Madison didn't like unnecessary noise. I brewed coffee for Ethan, made breakfast for Noah, 9, and Ellie, 6 fried eggs, toast, orange juice, always to each child's portion. As I set the plates down, Madison stepped out, white shirt, pencil skirt, heels ticking like a metronome. Her expensive perfume flooded the kitchen, drowning the smell of fresh coffee. She never said hello. She kissed the kids and reminded, "No sugar for Ellie, Mom, remember?" Then grabbed her bag, giving me a glance like you'd give a fixture. The door shut, the perfume hanging in the air, making it hard to breathe. Ethan was different. He was as gentle as ever, but gentleness had hardened into silence. Every morning when I poured coffee, he said, "Thanks, Mom," eyes glued to his phone. Words turned to habit, not feeling. I told myself, he's busy, let it go. But my heart pinched. Maybe nothing is lonelier than being spoken to by someone you love in a voice of obligation. I cleared the table, gathered dishes, washed towels, straightened rooms, tasks chained together with no days off. I used to think helping your children was joy until I realized joy exists only when you are thanked. At night, after dinner, Madison would go to the sink, run a finger along the edge and say, sweet and sharp, "Caroline, the sink isn't clean. There's a watermark here." I stood still, hands wet. Ethan sat at the table, head down, pretending to read the news. No one defended me. No one said a word. Only the kids' laughter in the living room reminded me I still existed in this house. Gradually, I disappeared from every family photo. Holidays, birthdays, Christmas, picnics. Madison would say, "Mom, can you take one for us?" And so, I held the camera. I stood behind the lens, framed them, counted 1, 2, 3, and clicked. In the picture, them smiling, hands clasped, matching outfits. Me? I was the one making sure the shot was straight. When they posted it, the caption was always, "Family time," and each time I looked, I felt a little more hollow. One afternoon, I heard Madison talking on the porch. Her voice was low, but every word carried because the glass door was cracked open. Old and still living free, like having a private maid. She cooks, babysits, cleans, no paycheck. Who wouldn't want that? I was folding a tablecloth when my hands stopped. I heard all of it, every word, every breath. She chuckled softly, a piercing sound like a wine glass shattering inside me. I didn't cry. Strangely, no tears. I felt a huge silence instead, like the sea at low tide. In that silence, something moved slow and certain. A part of me woke up, the part Robert once called Caroline's backbone. That night, once everyone slept, I opened my nightstand drawer and took out a small voice recorder I'd used back in my accounting days. I put in fresh batteries and tucked it under the lace runner on the dining table. The green light blinked. Everything started then. I recorded every conversation, every belittling comment, every joke with a sting that Madison let fly. She didn't know her voice was stored in my memory minute by minute, second by second. Not just recordings, I began saving every receipt. Whenever I bought anything for the house, new washer, leather sofa set, roof repair after the storm, HVAC maintenance, I snapped a photo and filed it on my laptop. Each file was carefully named: washer 5/22, roof fix 8/23, couch set 12/23. I logged dates, stores, prices, and my signature on the bottom. In the cabinet, I kept a brown leather notebook one Robert gave me for our 30th anniversary. I wrote everything not out of rage, but with an accountant's precision. I recorded every task I did, every expense I paid. I missed nothing. No one argues with numbers, Robert used to say. I smiled and nodded. Exactly. Numbers don't lie. One evening, Madison asked, "Caroline, can you pay the electric bill this time? My card's glitching. I'll transfer it back." I agreed and wrote down the date, time, amount. The transfer back never came. I didn't ask. I added a small note: "Not reimbursed." The days after, I did everything as usual. I cooked, laughed when the kids hugged me. I still took photos for that happy family. Only one thing changed. I was no longer the forgotten one. I was the observer. I was the one collecting proof. One afternoon, while Madison was on the phone with her mother in California, I heard her say, "Mom, I swear I can't stand her anymore. She's like a ghost in the house. Doesn't leave, doesn't talk, doesn't bother, but always there. It's like she's waiting for something." I sat in the living room corner, rolling yarn, gazing out the window. I knew I wasn't mistaken. She had started to fear me not because of what I said, but because of what I didn't. I realized that in silence, a person can become much stronger. I was no longer the weak mother pushed into a corner. I was the one who knew too much, heard too much, and was waiting for the right moment. I hid a second recorder in the laundry room, right above the shelf with the detergent. A third went into the kitchen cabinet, next to the cereal box Madison likes. I carefully changed the batteries every month, deleted the extra bits, and kept the valuable parts. Everything was stored on a password-protected USB drive, hidden in the drawer at the bottom of my suitcase. Sometimes I asked myself, if Robert were still alive, what would he say seeing me like this? He would be sad, perhaps, but he would understand. Because I didn't do this out of hatred, I did it to survive. I still went to the market, still brought flowers home for the dining table, still cooked full dinners like a devoted mother. But when the afternoon light spilled through the window and lit up the family time frame on the wall, all I saw was a blank space where I should have been. No one took a single photo of me. No one asked, "Do you want to be in the picture?" I slowly vanished from every trace of my own family, as if I had never existed. But they didn't know that while they erased me from the photos, I was rewriting the story my way, with numbers, with audio files, with little documents they dismissed. And then one day, when there was enough, I knew I would no longer be the one holding the camera. I would be the one exposing the whole picture. The mirador sparkled with lights, crystal chandeliers glittering from the ceiling, red wine glowing in glass. The room was full of laughter, smooth jazz, and the clink of spoons on porcelain. That night, they threw a party for my daughter-in-law, Madison Pierce, promoted to Regional Operations Director. A title everyone called admirable. I was invited at the last minute when Ethan blurted out, "Mom should come too, right?" Madison just smiled. "Of course, if you'd like." It sounded polite, but the tone made me feel like a mismatched accessory. I chose a navy blue dress, the one Robert used to say, "Makes you look 10 years younger." I ironed it myself that afternoon and prepared a small gift wrapped in silver paper. A Parker fountain pen engraved, "To Madison, congratulations." I wanted a peaceful evening, even though I held back many words. I didn't know it would be the night that ended all my faith in what they called family. When I walked in, Madison stood in the middle of the crowd, light hitting her hair, making her look like an actress at a movie premiere. People laughed, raised glasses, and made toasts. Ethan stood by his wife, his smile a little strained. I came closer and gently set the gift on the table. "Congratulations, Madison. I'm proud of you." She turned, her smile like a razor. "Oh, thank you, Mom. Did you find a seat?" Her voice was sweet, but her eyes didn't bother hiding the irritation. A server stepped up and asked for the reservation name. Madison handed over the list. 4 people. Madison, Ethan, Noah, Ellie. "Not me." The server hesitated. Madison tilted her head, voice low but cold. "It's fine. She's just tagging along. She was never part of this family." That sentence can destroy a mother or wake her up. For me, it did both. What do you think? How cruel can a sentence get before you're forced to walk away? Leave a few lines below sometimes. A single share is enough for someone to feel heard. Every sound in the room seemed to pause. The music still played, but I couldn't hear anything except my heart racing. Ethan froze, then pretended to study his wine glass. A woman at the next table turned to look at me with pity. It felt like being stripped bare in front of everyone. I went still, my face burning, my throat locked. I heard myself give a small, awkward laugh just to save face. Ethan said nothing, no defense, not even a glance. He just stood there like a post, hoping if he stayed quiet long enough, it would all blow over. As for Madison, after saying that, she simply turned to the staff and smiled. "Oh, could I get some fresh lemon, please?" Then she went right back to chatting with her coworkers, cheerful as if nothing had happened. I wanted to leave right then, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Ethan lowered his head and murmured, "Mom, don't mind her. She's had a little to drink." I looked at my son. That sentence hurt more than Madison's insult. As the dinner wound down, she laughed loudly, raised her glass, then turned to me, voice smooth and mocking. "Oh, Mom, remember to heat the leftovers in the fridge. Don't let them go to waste." The whole table burst out laughing, some probably out of politeness, but I heard a drawn-out "ha ha ha" from one of her coworkers. I sat still, my hand gripping the table's edge until my knuckles went white. In that roar of laughter, I felt myself vanish, as if the whole world had agreed I didn't deserve respect. I inhaled. In that moment, something inside me went dark. Another flame, small but stubborn, flared up. I didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't cry. I just stood, placed my napkin on the table, and said softly, "Thank you for the dinner." Then I turned and walked out of the restaurant. The Santa Fe night was cold and dry, carrying dust and a hint of lavender from the cafe across the street. The warm light washed over my face, and I realized I was trembling not from the cold, but from anger and clarity. I walked slowly to the parking lot, my hand gripping my purse. Inside me, humiliation had hardened into resolve. I whispered, like speaking to myself, "Enough, Caroline, enough." On the drive home, I turned on the radio but didn't hear a word. My mind replayed Madison saying, "She was never part of this family." The line rang out, steel cold, then dissolved into the night's silence. In that moment, I didn't feel pain anymore, just a sharp truth. They had treated me like a stranger for a long time. I was simply the last to admit it. The house appeared under silver moonlight. I opened the door and stepped in without turning on the lights. In the dark, everything was tidy because of my hands. On the kitchen counter, I saw the leftover boxes Madison told me not to waste. I lifted a lid. The smell of cold food hit me. I let out a rough, half-bitter laugh. "No, Madison," I muttered. "Some things, once cold, only make people sick if you reheat them." I flipped the light on. The soft glow fell across the wall of photos. Noah, Ellie, Ethan, Madison, all smiling. And me? I was the one holding the camera. I wasn't in a single frame. Suddenly, I felt light. If they could erase me from the pictures, I had the right to erase them from my life. I sat at the table, took off the old earrings Robert had given me, then opened the safe. The thick file lay still, as if waiting. I pulled out each item: the house deed, shopping receipts, bank statements, a photocopy of the contract, the USB with the recordings. Every sheet testified I wasn't freeloading in my own home. I arranged everything neatly in a document pouch. Then I opened my laptop and checked the backups. Everything was there: phone recordings of Madison, photos of bills I'd paid, emails I'd sent the roofing company. I moved them into a new folder and named it Tomorrow. Then I wrote a handwritten letter to Ethan. Black ink, steady strokes, no shaking. "Ethan, when a mother is humiliated in front of her son and he stays silent, family stops meaning anything. I'm leaving not to run away, but to keep what's left of my dignity. I've left everything you need to understand papers, receipts, and all the things you never noticed. Don't look for me until you're ready to see me as a person, not a shadow in the house." I folded the letter and placed it in the center of the table beside a copy of the deed and the key ring. Next to it, I set an envelope labeled "For Ethan Only." I stood and walked the house one last time. The curtains I'd washed that morning still smelled fresh. The teacups on the shelf sat exactly where they should. I touched the stair rail, then paused at the window where I used to watch Noah play in the yard. Everything was peaceful, but none of it was mine anymore. I went to my room and packed a few clothes into a suitcase, along with the brown leather journal I'd kept for 3 years. I took only what belonged to me, not much, but enough. When I closed the suitcase, the zipper's dry rasp sounded like the end of a chapter. Before leaving, I looked around one last time. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "Goodbye, my house, the last time I'll call you that." I rolled the suitcase onto the porch and turned on the outside light. The glow spilled over the steps I used to scrub every morning. I locked the door, pulled the key, and slipped it into my bag. The click landed clean and final. The Santa Fe night was cold and dry, lifting a few loose strands of hair. I pulled my coat tight and walked, each step lighter than the last. On the empty street, the streetlights stretched out, my shadow trailing behind like a ribbon. I looked back at the house one final time, the living room light still spilling through the window like hollow eyes. I smiled. Tomorrow, when they come home, they'll find the lights on, the table bare, and a thick envelope in the center. They'll learn some dinners are never reheated, and some mothers, when silent, are just beginning to take everything back. That night, the clock read 1:20 a.m. when their silver SUV rolled into the driveway. The engine cut out, replaced by laughter still tinged with wine and lipstick. Madison laughed loud, her voice high and thin, slicing the Santa Fe night like a narrow blade. "Did you see her face? God! Tragedy on two legs!" Ethan didn't answer, only cleared his throat. The door swung open, the porch light spilled across the tile. The house was pitch black, except for that light the habit I'd kept so they wouldn't trip coming home late. Madison stumbled over her own sandals and snapped, "Couldn't she pick up all this junk? It's always a mess." She flicked the switch. The kitchen lit up. But in that moment, her smile froze. The living room was empty, unusually still. No washer running, no smell of leftovers, no clatter of me tidying like every night. The house was clean, orderly, and lifeless. Ethan looked around. My door was ajar, the bed neatly made, the closet empty, only wooden hangers left and a small sticky note. "Thank you for making everything clear." On the dining table, centered under the warm light, sat a cream envelope. Madison frowned. "What's this?" Ethan stepped forward, hands shaking as he opened it. Inside were three things: a detailed breakdown of my financial contributions over the past 3 years, a small silver USB labeled "For Ethan," and a copy of the house deed with Caroline Pierce standing out clearly under owner. Ethan unfolded the first sheet. The numbers were typed carefully, exact to the cent. Down payment, $120,000. Roof repair, $14,500. Sofa purchase, carpet cleaning, HVAC maintenance, $8,900. Utilities, taxes, and other support, $41,200. Total, $185,600, all in my name, with receipts attached. Ethan stared at the total, his face draining. He muttered, "No way." Madison snatched the paper, skimmed it, and let out a flat laugh. "Oh, please," she counted every penny. Typical old folks, always thinking money buys affection. Ethan didn't answer. His grip tightened until the edges crinkled. He leaned down, plugged the USB into the laptop. The screen lit up. The first file name appeared. Madison, call 923, MP3. He hit play. From the speakers came Madison's voice, clear, cold, and smug. "Just push her into a cheap nursing home and it's done. Your mom's weak. No one's going to check paperwork. Then sell the house, split the money. That'll cover us for a year." Another woman asked, "What about Ethan?" Madison scoffed. "He's easy. Say a few lines about my sacrifice and he'll buy it." Men. The room went dead silent. Ethan sank into a chair, eyes wide, his face colorless. Everything he'd believed defended, kept quiet to keep the peace, turned around and tore him up. Madison stood frozen, then suddenly shrieked, "That's edited! I never said that! She set me up!" Ethan turned to his wife, his eyes empty. "But that's your voice, Madison. No mistaking it. Even the way you laugh. That men line." Madison stepped back, trembling. She tried to raise her voice, as if volume could drown fear. "You believe her over me? You know what she's like, always playing the weak, pitiful act." Ethan didn't reply. He only lowered his head and opened the second file. Madison's voice again, even clearer. "If she gets sick, even better. One competency certificate is enough to have him sign the house over." Ethan let the laptop fall shut and bent forward, hands on his head. For the first time in 3 years, he saw his wife stripped bare, terrifyingly so. The air congealed. Madison stepped forward and grabbed his shoulder. "Ethan, listen. It's not what you think." He shook her off, voice ragged. "Not what I think? For 3 years my mom lived here, did everything, paid for almost all of it, and you called her a burden? Do you know she's never taken place for it? A single dollar from you?" Madison went silent. For the first time, she had nothing to say. The house sank into heavy quiet. Small footsteps sounded on the stairs. Noah, hair messy and eyes sleepy, stood at the railing. "Where's Grandma, Dad?" Why is it so dark? Ethan turned back, attempted a smile, but his voice cracked. Grandma went to rest for a while, buddy. Behind him, Ellie rubbed her eyes, sniffling. I didn't say goodnight to Grandma. Madison turned away, arms crossed tight, avoiding the kid's eyes. Ethan could only nod, then shut the laptop. He folded the papers and slipped everything back into the envelope. Outside, the night wind kicked up. The curtains stirred. Moonlight slid through the gap, landing on the line, Caroline Pierce, owner, printed clearly on the deed copy. Madison saw it and went pale. She stepped forward, yanked the page up, and shouted, "She can't do this! This house is ours!" Ethan spoke softly, almost a whisper. "No, Madison, it's hers." Attorney Harold said it from the start. "I just never thought we'd need that." She stood still for a few seconds, then threw the page down, voice tight with fury. "Fine. Let her try. She thinks she can beat me?" But for the first time, her voice shook. Noah walked up to the table, picked the fallen paper, and looked up. "Grandma left this letter for you, Dad?" Ethan nodded, took the envelope back, and tucked it carefully into the document box. "Yeah, buddy. Let Dad hold on to it, okay?" The boy nodded and quietly headed back to his room, leading his sister. The kid's door clicked shut. The house fell into silence. Ethan sat motionless for a long time. Madison turned toward the balcony, panic in her eyes. On the dining table, a wine glass tipped, dark red spilling out, creeping toward the page with my name like a blood-red exclamation mark. As for me, I was asleep on Martha Lane's old sofa. A small lamp glowed through the curtain, pooling, warm yellow on the ceiling. Martha tucked a blanket around me and whispered, "You okay, Caroline?" I smiled, my voice low and light as air. "I'm okay, Martha. For the first time in 3 years, I'm sleeping in a house where no one tells me to scrub the sink." Outside, the Santa Fe night breeze drifted through her lavender garden, its soft scent spreading through the room. I closed my eyes, my eyelids growing heavy. In the quiet, I heard someone, maybe me, in a distant dream whisper, "Justice doesn't have to rush. It only needs to wait for morning." And so, after 3 years of being a shadow in my own home, I slept in peace, the first sleep in freedom. The next morning, Santa Fe sunlight angled through Martha's window. The smell of fresh coffee and toast filled the living room. I sat on the chair, cupping a hot mug, watching the first rays crawl across the wooden wall. For 3 years, I'd always woken early, but this morning, for the first time, I woke without having to serve anyone. From the kitchen, Martha looked over and said softly, "What are you going to do next, Caroline?" I set the mug down. Calm. "Go see Avery. It's time I do the right thing, not for revenge, but to take my name back. Avery Pierce, my niece, is a family property attorney. She's in her 30s, quick, bright-eyed, and steady like Robert when he was young. I met her at the Pierce and Mendez office on Canyon Road, the street known for galleries and craft shops. When I walked in, Avery was already waiting, hair neatly pinned, thin frames on her nose. She stood and hugged me tight. "Aunt Caroline," I heard. "I'm so sorry." I smiled. "No need to be sorry. I'm alive, and I have proof. That's enough." I set the file bag on the table, heavy, thick, and so orderly that Avery looked a little stunned. "Wow, are you planning to sue the whole world?" I gave a small laugh. "No, I just want my place back in the very house I bought." Avery opened the bag and began reviewing each item: the house deed, bank statements, receipts, photos, and the USB with recordings. She went through everything carefully, missing nothing. When she opened her laptop, she plugged in the USB and listened to a short clip, just a few seconds of Madison's voice. "Just push her into a cheap nursing home and it's done." Avery grimaced and shook her head. "Horrible, but it makes my job easier. You have everything: paperwork, audio, spending proof, even lawful ownership. It's all clear. She took quick notes, then continued. Now, I'll contact Mr. Harold Kemp to confirm the file. He drafted the original house paperwork, right? I nodded. He knows everything. I want to do this legally and properly, not to demean anyone, just to make them see the truth. Avery nodded and called right there at her desk. I heard Harold's warm, steady voice on the other end. Oh, Mrs. Pierce, I knew this day would come. The documents are still valid. No one can dispute ownership without your signature. I'll support you fully. Hearing him, I felt a warmth spread in my chest, not joy, but validation. Finally, someone believed me without me having to defend myself. Avery printed a power of attorney and asked me to sign. She said, "You won't need to appear in court. We'll send a cooperation demand before filing suit. If they're willing to negotiate, we can settle this quietly." I asked, "And if they're not?" Avery gave a small smile. "Then they'll have to explain in court why they lived in someone else's house while calling that person a freeloader." I went quiet. Deep down, I didn't want to see my son sitting in a courtroom. I had lost a husband. I didn't want to lose my only child. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "I don't want to destroy this relationship. I just want my dignity back and the ownership of the house that's mine." Avery nodded. "I understand. Will do. This as gently as possible." That afternoon, Avery and Harold drafted the letter. In it, they clearly stated, Caroline Pierce is the lawful owner of the house. Madison and Ethan Pierce have violated residential rights through property misuse, insults, and defamation. Caroline Pierce is not seeking immediate eviction, only a signed cooperation agreement, asset acknowledgement, and an end to all insulting behavior. The letter was sent by email, CC'd to both Madison and Ethan. When I signed my name at the end, my hand was steady. I reread every line, feeling as if I were closing a door not to imprison anyone, but to keep peace for myself. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. A text from Madison. "Caroline, I'm sorry if anything last night upset you. I was drunk. Hope you don't blow this out of proportion." I read it, then deleted it. Short, cold, and not the least bit sincere. Right after, Ethan called. His voice shook. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't think it would go this far. I just want you to talk to me. Please don't get lawyers involved." I went still, staring at the screen with my son's name on it. I didn't answer. I just silenced the phone and set it face down on the table. Outside, evening was falling. I stepped onto the porch. The Santa Fe breeze stirred the purple lavender. Martha brought out 2 cups of tea and asked, "So you really did it?" I nodded, my voice light as the wind. "I don't want to beat anyone anymore, Martha. I just want respect." That night, I opened my laptop and logged into the social account I hadn't used in a long time. I typed one short line. That was all. Self-respect doesn't kill anyone. It saved my life. I didn't add anything. No names, no details, just one sentence, simple, honest. I shut the computer and went to bed. The next morning, Martha woke me with a stunned voice. "Caroline, your post is spreading everywhere." I bolted upright and looked at my phone. Over 800 shares, hundreds of comments from women everywhere. I was kicked out by my daughter-in-law, too. I know that feeling. Thank you for speaking for so many of us. We're not weak, we just love too much. I sat quietly and read each line, feeling both sad and warm. Some women were older than me, some younger, some just sent a heart emoji, but I knew they understood. All my life, I thought if I stayed silent long enough, people would recognize my kindness. Now I understand. Staying silent too long only makes people forget you ever existed. I brewed tea, took it to the porch, and watched the sunlight spill over distant mountains. In my mind, those women kept appearing: mothers, wives, people labeled extra. I realized my story wasn't just about a house. It was about a generation of women forgotten for being too patient. Martha sat beside me and held my hand. See, Caroline, you didn't just reclaim a house, you're helping the whole world see their worth. I smiled and looked into the distance. No, Martha, I just told my story. They're the ones waking up. I took a deep breath, let the dry Santa Fe air fill my chest, and closed my eyes. In that moment, I felt free not because I had won, but because I had dared to speak. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a forgotten mother. I am Caroline Pierce, a woman who stood up, not for revenge, but to be seen. Attorney Harold Kemp's conference room was on the 4th floor of a small building on Central Avenue, where the scent of old wood mixed with coffee in a strangely calming way. Light from a large window slanted across the oak table, reflecting off neatly stacked files so orderly it felt almost solemn. I sat at the head of the table, facing Ethan and Madison. They arrived together but sat far enough apart to make the air between them colder than the Santa Fe morning outside. Madison wasn't made up like usual. She wore a crisp, white shirt, hands clasped tight on her lap. Ethan looked worn out, stubble on his chin, dark circles under his eyes. To my right was Avery, my niece, calm face, sharp eyes. Next to her sat Harold Kemp, in his familiar gray suit and half-rimmed glasses. He poured me coffee, his voice low and gentle. "Mrs. Pierce, everyone's here. Shall we begin?" I nodded, warming my hands on the cup. Avery opened the first file, her voice clear and decisive. "This is the summary of Mrs. Caroline Pierce's financial investments in the Edgewood home, totaling $185,600, including maintenance, repairs, and property taxes. Additionally, Mrs. Pierce is the sole lawful owner, confirmed by New Mexico property records, date signed, July 4, 2022. Madison looked up, her eyes flickering, maybe hoping this was just a bluff. But Harold slid her a copy of the deed and said, "This is the original on file at our office. Mrs. Pierce holds full title, no co-ownership, no third-party guarantee." Silence stretched. Ethan looked at the paper, then at me, his face draining. "Mom, you've been on the title this whole time?" I nodded slightly. "Yes. Harold advised it since the purchase funds were entirely mine. I didn't want to boast, and I never intended to keep it forever, but now, maybe this is the only way we can talk honestly." Ethan lowered his head, hands clasped. I could see confusion and shame in his eyes. He didn't look up when Avery continued. "So today we're presenting 3 options so both sides can reach an agreement without court." Harold opened another file and slid it to Ethan and Madison. His words slow and precise. Option 1, return the house to Mrs. Caroline and move out within 60 days. Option 2, buy the entire house at current market value. We have a preliminary valuation of about $510,000. And option 3, establish conditional co-ownership, Mrs. Caroline holds 60%, you hold 40%, with conditions set by her side. Ethan looked up, voice tight. "What conditions, sir?" I looked at my son, then to Harold. He nodded for me to speak. "The conditions are," I began, steady, "I retain the right to rent out my 60%. I don't want to live together anymore, but I want the house maintained. If you want to stay, you agree all costs and obligations will be split by ownership share." Madison pressed her lips, ready to snap back, but I went on. "And one more thing. Ethan, you and I will do family therapy for 6 months, once a week, to rebuild communication. Madison, you must do individual therapy. Avery will refer someone. You need to face your insulting, controlling behavior." Madison shot to her feet, eyes blazing. "You're turning this into a joke." "I don't need therapy, I just—" Avery cut in, calm but icy. "If you don't agree, we'll file suit and seek removal from the property. Mrs. Pierce has ample evidence of insult and threats." "I don't think you want that in your legal record, Madison." The room went silent again. The wall clock ticked loud enough to count breaths. Ethan took Madison's hand and said quietly, "Madison, stop." I've been wrong for too long. At least let Mom have some peace." Madison looked at him, exhausted, like someone after a long war. She sat down, head lowered, voice hoarse. "Fine. I agree." Harold nodded and opened the draft agreement. "There's also an addendum. If any party living in the house violates respectful conduct toward tenants or co-owners, a forced sale of the entire property takes immediate effect. Proceeds will be split 60-40. I looked at the paper and felt everything fall into place. No more back and forth, no payback. Fairness now lived on paper, backed by law, no longer depending on anyone's goodwill. Ethan signed first, his hand slightly shaking. Madison signed next, biting her lip. When it was my turn, Harold slid the pen to me. I took it, looked at Caroline Pierce on the signature line, and signed. For the first time in years, my hand didn't tremble. When the pen clicked down, I heard Harold exhale softly. "That's it. Everything's within the law now. No one can dismiss you again, Mrs. Pierce." I nodded. "I don't need their reverence. I just need them to stop." The meeting ended in quiet. Ethan stood and walked toward me. He looked at me a long time, eyes holding something broken and something trying to mend. "Mom, I'm sorry. I let this go too far. I'll do therapy. I promise." I looked at my son and said gently, "Do it for yourself, not for me." Madison said nothing. She only dipped her head, eyes on the floor. For the first time, I saw no arrogance there, only fear and regret. I gathered the files and thanked Harold and Avery. Before I reached the door, I turned back to both of them, my son I'd raised with everything I had, and the woman who once made me feel useless. I felt no anger, no victory. Only a deep quiet settling into my chest, like early spring wind over the desert. Outside, Santa Fe's sky was clear, sunlight pouring gold on the sidewalk. I stopped at a small flower shop down the block and bought a bundle of lavender. Martha always said, "Lavender softens everything." Maybe today was the first day I truly believed that. I looked toward the distance, where the road led back to a house that had been a battleground, now clearly defined by signatures and truth. I took a long breath, a small smile on my lips. Not the smile of a winner, but of someone who got herself back. I walked on in the golden light, my heart light as if the early spring wind were whispering, "Caroline, you're back." 3 weeks after the meeting at Harold's office, the Edgewood house had a new rhythm, if not a new owner. I didn't move back, but I kept my 60%, as agreed. I decided to rent out my share so the house wouldn't sit empty, and so Ethan and Madison would learn to live with others, no longer free to dominate the space. My first tenant was Angela Brooks, a 39-year-old high school teacher who'd recently lost her husband. She had 2 children, Marcus, 13, and Lila, 9, both well-mannered and sweet. When Avery sent me their file, I read every line, then smiled. They weren't wealthy, but they were kind, and I believe that's worth more than any deposit. On move-in day, I was there not to supervise, but to witness a new start. Santa Fe was bright, with a soft breeze through the sage along the fence. Angela arrived in an old minivan loaded with boxes of books, a few potted plants, and a cat named Pudding. Ethan opened the gate. He nodded politely, his voice rough but courteous. "Welcome, Miss Brooks. I'm Ethan. Glad to have you." Angela smiled, warm and genuine. "Thank you. We'll do our best to keep the house as clean as new." Madison stood behind Ethan, her face stiff as stone. She forced a smile, lips tight. I saw the strain in her eyes, a person used to ruling her space, now having to share it. When Angela came over to me, she held out her hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Pierce, for giving us this chance. We're truly grateful." I took her hand, my eyes softening. "Just call me Caroline, and don't thank me, just live kindly. That's enough." Madison shot me a quick look, a crooked smile. I turned to her, my voice light but clear. "And you, Madison, call me Caroline, too. Mom isn't necessary anymore." That sentence froze the air for a few seconds. Ethan said nothing, and Madison gave the tiniest nod, eyes down. I said no more, just helped Angela carry a few boxes. That afternoon the house filled with footsteps, laughter, and the rustle of packing paper. Lila squealed when she saw her new room's window face the garden. "I can see the lavender from my bed, Mom." Marcus hurried off to help Ethan fix an outlet in the kitchen. I watched from the porch. A strange feeling moving through me, this house, once a place of hurt, now echoed with children's laughter. That evening, Angela invited everyone to stay for the first dinner. She made lemon-baked salmon, simple but fragrant. The scent of lemon and butter drifted through the air, mixing with fresh bread, turning the kitchen once full of nagging into something warmly human. When we sat down, the mood was unlike any meal before. No commands, no cutting looks, just small talk, Marcus sharing about his new school, and Lila giggling as Ellie told her about art class. Madison tried to be pleasant, but the strain showed. When Angela got up to fetch more water, Madison muttered just loud enough, "Wonder if they'll conserve water. This month's bill is going to double." Angela heard it, but she didn't get angry. She just smiled, pulled a printed receipt from her wallet, and set it lightly on the table. "We've already paid our share, Madison. Don't worry." Her voice was calm, soft but weighty. Silence held for a few seconds. Ethan exhaled, then stood, picked up his plate and said, "I'll do the dishes. Sit down." Madison looked at him, surprised, like she was seeing someone else entirely. As for me, I sat quietly, watching the son I thought I'd lost. That small act, washing a stack of plates, was worth more than gold to me. When dinner ended, I stood, thanked everyone, and got ready to go. Angela walked me out and said softly, "You know, this house has a strange energy. I was scared at first, but now I think it's learning to breathe again." I smiled. "It's not just the house, Angela. The people inside are learning to breathe too." After that day, I didn't visit Edgewood often. I let Angela and her family own that space and me. I only needed to know things were moving the right way. But Angela still called every week, sharing small stories I never got tired of hearing. Once, she said, "Today Ellie came over too. Help Lila with art homework." They laughed the whole time. Madison came down to the kitchen, saw them, and just stood there. Then she grabbed a glass of water and turned away, but I could see her eyes were red. I went quiet for a moment, then said only, "Sometimes people just need to witness ordinary kindness to realize how wrongly they've been living." Another week, Angela told me, cheerful, Noah and Marcus just won the school baseball championship together. Ethan cheered the whole game, and Madison, she brought treats for the team. "I think she's changing." I smiled and said softly, "Good. That kitchen is teaching them kindness again." I pictured the kitchen once a battlefield of criticism, now a quiet classroom. Angela teaching her kids to wash dishes, Ethan helping with dinner, Madison learning to apologize when water boils over. Each child's laugh, every small story from shared meals like stitching cracks back together in that house and in themselves. One afternoon, Angela sent me a photo. 4 kids around the table, beaming, with Madison cutting cake behind them and Ethan pouring water. The caption read, "This kitchen is healing." I stared at it for a long time. Not out of pride or gloating, but because I recognized the most miraculous thing in any story. Kindness can grow back even on old ground. One afternoon, while I was watering plants on Martha's porch, Angela called. Her voice was light as air. "Caroline, I just wanted to say thank you. If you hadn't believed in us, that house wouldn't have had a chance to become a home again." I laughed. "No, Angela. Thank you for making it a home. I only rented out bricks you breathed the soul back in." That night, I sat by the window, watching the golden lights blur along the empty street. Inside, I felt a strange peace. I no longer lived in that Edgewood house, but I knew it was alive, teaching people how to love and respect. Outside, the wind carried the scent of lavender, the scent I once thought belonged to loneliness. Now it just made me smile. I whispered, as if to myself. Indeed, sometimes the deepest lessons are taught in the kitchen, and the tuition for them is the years we kept quiet. I closed the window and turned off the light. The Santa Fe night softened warm and gentle, like the arms of life itself, soothing me, a mother once forgotten, now seen, heard, and understood. The therapy office was in a small building on Cerrillos Road, downtown Santa Fe. Outside, blazing yellow maples. Inside, the air full of lavender oil and pine. On the wall hung a small, carved wooden sign. Healing doesn't erase the past, it teaches us how to carry it. I stared at that line for a long time before the door opened. Doctor. Helen Moore, a family therapist in her 50s, had a kind face and sharp eyes. She gestured to 2 chairs facing each other, with a small table and fresh flowers between them. Ethan sat on the left, and I on the right. No one spoke for the first few minutes. Helen smiled gently. We'll start with the simplest thing. Ethan, can you say why you stayed silent all this time? Ethan drew a deep breath. I saw his shoulders tremble. He spoke slowly, voice rough, as if every word dragged along a shame. Because I was afraid, Mom. Afraid of losing my wife, afraid the family would break, afraid of confrontation. I thought if I stayed quiet, things would fix themselves. But I didn't know. Silence is a form of betrayal, too. I didn't speak right away. Helen looked to me and nodded for encouragement. I spoke in a low, even voice. As for me, I hurt because I was forgotten, not because of lost money or a lost house, but because each morning I woke up and felt invisible in the very family I nurtured. I cooked, I did laundry, I kept the peace, yet no one looked at me as a person anymore. Helen wrote a few lines, then said, "You're both telling the truth, but truth alone isn't enough. You're going to write it down, not for me, for yourselves. A sincere apology letter. No defenses, no blame, only facts and feelings." I looked at Ethan. He nodded. That session ended in silence, just the scratch of pens and the sound of breathing. I saw my son's eyes redden as he folded his letter. The following week, Helen asked us to read our letters to each other. Ethan unfolded his page, hands shaking. "Mom, I hurt you with my silence. I didn't defend you because I was a coward. I let you be humiliated when all I had to do was speak. I forgot you taught me to stand tall and tell the truth. I'm sorry I let fear grow bigger than gratitude. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I want to start over, not to bring you back home, but so you'll know I'm still your son." I stayed quiet for a long time. Helen nodded toward me. I opened my letter and read slowly, word by word. "Ethan, I don't hate you. I'm just hurt. I once believed love could replace respect, and that was my biggest mistake. I let you see me endure, so you thought it was natural. I don't blame you. I just want you to understand. Love doesn't have to shout, but it must have boundaries. I forgive you, but I won't go back to the old life." Ethan said nothing. He just nodded, eyes wet. Helen smiled. That's a beginning. At the same time, Madison began her own therapy with another specialist. I didn't see her, but Helen occasionally shared brief updates with Madison's consent. She said, "Madison is learning to face her fears. She fears poverty, being looked down on, falling short of her mother-in-law. Since childhood, she's lived in a family that measured people by wealth. That fear made her try to control everything." I listened, feeling both compassion and fatigue. I said softly, "Tell her I don't need her to be perfect. I just need her to be human, not the best, not the winner." Helen looked at me and smiled. "Maybe you're teaching Madison something her own mother never did." In later sessions, Ethan and I began to talk more. Sometimes I cried, but they weren't bitter tears, just release. I told my son, "Ethan, I will never return to that house as a housekeeper. If I visit, I'm a guest. I need boundaries, and you have to learn to respect them." He nodded and said very quietly, "I understand, Mom, and I will." After that, I noticed something change. Each morning, as I made coffee, my phone rang, Ethan calling, "Hi, Mom, have you had breakfast?" At first I laughed, thinking he dialed the wrong number. But he called every day sometimes just to ask whether I preferred tea or coffee. A small thing, but it warmed me. One Saturday afternoon, Noah called, "Grandma, I'm in a play at school next week." "I'm the kind wolf?" I laughed into the phone. "Then I'll come see the first kind wolf I've ever met." The next week, I went to the school, a small stage, warm lights, kids in clumsy costumes. Ethan and Madison sat in the middle row. I chose the back. When Noah spotted me, he waved like crazy. I smiled and waved back. Ethan's eyes met mine, and he gave a small nod, just enough to warm my heart. After the show, Madison came over and said softly, "Thank you for coming." I simply smiled. I didn't need forgiveness, just the truth. A week later, I got an email titled, "From Madison." I hesitated, then opened it. 3 pages, no flourish, no excuses. "Caroline, I was wrong. I thought control was protection and that whoever has more gets more say. I forgot kindness isn't in a marriage contract, it's in how we treat each other. I don't expect you to forget, only that someday you can look at me without feeling pain. I'll continue therapy not to win anyone over, but to learn to live decently." I finished reading and sat quietly for a long time. I didn't reply. I saved the letter not to threaten, but to remind myself people can change, if they truly reflect. The next morning, I stopped by a small shoe shop on the corner. I bought a new pair of sneakers in teal, the first pair I'd bought for myself in years. The clerk asked, "Going walking?" I smiled. "Yes, starting tomorrow morning." And I did. At sunrise the next day, I laced up and stepped onto the gravel trail behind Martha's house. Each footfall beat steady on the path, like my own heartbeat, sure, free, and calm. I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing for certain. I'm not walking back to where I was. I'm walking toward myself. 6 months had passed since I signed the co-ownership agreement. Spring in Santa Fe had softened. The lavender by Martha's porch bloomed purple again. I lived quietly, journaling, watering plants, walking each morning on the gravel path behind the house, the teal sneakers holding up, like my own steady peace. That morning, while making coffee, I got a text from Madison. "Caroline, if you have time, I'd like to meet and talk. Not about the past, but about a new start." I read it twice, then agreed. Not out of curiosity, but because I was calm enough now to see her differently. We met at a small cafe on Galisteo Street, with clay-colored walls and old wooden tables. When I walked in, Madison was already there, tidy, simple, no makeup, no designer labels. In front of her was a file neatly tied with ribbon. She stood and gave a small bow. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, sat, and waited for her to begin. Madison opened the file and set it on the table. Her voice was lower, softer, nothing like before. "I want to buy back 60% of the house. Here's a 5-year installment plan with reasonable interest and collateral in the form of shares I own in my company. I had my accountant and attorney prepare it. Every term is lawful." I stayed quiet, looking at the papers. Sunlight poured through the window, illuminating the table and highlighting the signature. "Madison Pierce at the bottom," I asked gently, without edge, only sincere curiosity. "Why now?" Madison looked up without flinching. "Because now is right. These 6 months, I've learned a lot. I've lived alongside a woman like Angela, someone not wealthy but full of self-respect. I've watched my kids be happy. I've watched Ethan change. I want that house to mean what it should, a home, but I don't want it back as a favor. I want it back as a responsibility. Her answer left me silent. Not because I was moved to tears, but because I recognized a different voice in her. No arrogance, no fear, just truth. I opened the file and turned page by page. The numbers, terms, and rates were clear. Madison had done everything properly, like someone who'd grown. I read carefully to the commitment clause. Quarterly payments, no more than 15 days late. Any violation forfeits the right to buy. Cautious, solid. I thought, this is a different Madison. I didn't sign right there. Instead, I called Avery and met her that afternoon to review the contract. Avery arrived with her usual professional calm, read each line slowly, then looked up. Aunt Caroline, this is a valid contract. Madison hired a good lawyer. The terms protect both sides. She smiled lightly. Are you going to agree? I nodded, then said quietly, there's one last condition I want to add. The next day, we met again at Harold's office to sign. Ethan came, looking calmer and more grounded than before. Angela came too, holding a small bouquet she handed me. We'd like to stay on as official tenants if that's okay. The house is steady now, the kids have friends, we truly see it as home. I smiled and laid my hand over hers. Angela, you made it a home, of course. Madison sat waiting for my new condition. I looked at her and spoke lightly but clearly. I'll sign, but I want one condition. Everyone in the house will have dinner together at least once a month. Not to show off, not to control, just to remind each other a home exists only if its people sit down together. Madison looked at me for a long moment, then picked up a pen and wrote that line into the addendum in a neat slant. Family dinner once a month. She signed and slid the paper to me. Agreed. We owe the kids that. I looked at Ethan. He nodded, eyes full of gratitude. Harold finalized everything, then handed me the pen. Anything else you want, Mrs. Pierce? I shook my head and smiled. No, I have enough. I signed clean, firm, steady. Not because I'd won, but because I'd found light after the storm. That afternoon, as we left the office, Madison stepped closer and said softly, Caroline, thank you for giving me this chance. I answered slowly, I didn't give it, Madison. You made it. I just didn't stand in its way. Angela, beside us, smiled kindly. Looks like you two just closed a chapter where nobody had to die. I laughed. Exactly. Only self-respect got to live again. That evening I went home and made myself chamomile tea. Martha looked up from her knitting and asked, All done, Caroline? I nodded, leaned back, and exhaled. All done. For the first time in years, I feel I don't owe anyone anything, and no one owes me. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no jolts. No faces from the promotion party, no knife-edged voice from Madison, no kitchen flooded with tears, only the soft wind on the porch and a trace of lavender. At sunrise, I woke as usual, brewed coffee, and opened the window. The first light poured in, warm as a blessing. I looked toward the hills, where the Edgewood house glimmered through the mist. It was no longer a prison, but proof that every storm can end in quiet if we stand firm. I whispered, as if to myself, Caroline Pierce, you've completed the circle of justice in your life. And I smiled a quiet, steady smile, round as a late spring moon. 1 month after signing the buyback contract, I got a text from Ethan. Mom, this Saturday night we're having our first monthly family dinner, like in the agreement. Could you come a little early? Madison wants to cook herself. I read it and smiled. Time moves fast. What once looked like ashes now was about to become a shared meal. No shouting, no fear, just dinner. A gentle apology from life. That afternoon, Santa Fe glowed with golden light. I wore a beige linen dress and brought a jar of lavender from Martha's garden. Driving to Edgewood, I felt unusually calm. From a distance I saw the old house now painted a warm cream, petunias hanging on the porch, and the fence freshly coated. It looked different, like the people inside. The door opened. Ellie ran out first, ponytail high, chirping. "Grandma Caroline is here! Grandma, you have to sit in the special seat!" I laughed and hugged her. In that moment, the smell of dough and cheese filled the air, pulling me back to years ago when this kitchen felt like mine. But this time, I walked in as a welcomed guest. In the kitchen, Madison wore an apron, hair in a bun, hands dusted with flour. On the table sat a lasagna straight from the oven, the cheese edges slightly burnt. Angela stood beside her, laughing. "A little char is right. I told you my recipe is never perfect, but it's always memorable." Madison laughed too, a bit shy. "Then tonight should be very memorable." I looked at the pan, rich and fragrant, blending with garlic bread. Maybe the house had never felt this warm. Ethan set the table while Noah and Marcus chased each other, arguing over seats. I sat in the chair by the window where I used to place myself during lonely mornings 3 years ago. Today, on the seat, lay a small handwritten card. "For Grandma Caroline." I brushed my fingers over it and smiled. I finally had a true place in this house. When everyone sat, Angela poured water, cheerful. "Let me start, since I'm responsible for the burnt cheese." Laughter around the table. Madison laughed too, then looked at me. "Caroline?" I followed Angela's recipe. "I can't promise it's great, but it's honest." I nodded. "As long as you cook with your hands and eat together, it's good." Ethan cut the first slice and shared it evenly. When he handed me a plate, he asked quietly, "Mom, I'm thinking about fixing the porch roof. What do you think?" "You did that with Dad once, so I want your input." I froze for a second, not at the question, but at how he asked. His voice held real respect. I wasn't ignored. I had a voice in my own house. I smiled. "Go with composite, not wood. Santa Fe winds crack wood fast." Ethan nodded and scribbled a note. We ate and talked. Lila and Ellie shared school stories. Noah bragged that his team was in the semifinals. Then he pulled a baseball from his backpack and handed it to me. "Grandma, this is our signed ball, me and my teammates. I want you to have it. You're our good luck charm." I took it, holding back tears. "Thank you, Noah. I'll keep it by the window where the light is brightest." Then Ellie brought out a watercolor, an older woman at a doorway with warm light behind her. Underneath, in crooked letters, "Grandma Caroline, the Keeper of Light." The room went quiet. I set my hand on the paper, voice trembling a little. "Thank you, Ellie. That light isn't mine, it belongs to this house. I just helped it not go out." Warmth returned. Laughter rose again. Madison sat across from me, something different in her eyes, no tightness, just honesty. She set down her fork and spoke slowly, clearly. "Caroline, I want to say this in front of everyone." She turned to Ethan, then the kids. "I'm sorry. I belittled you and hurt you. No reason is enough to excuse it. I just hope to relearn how to be a decent person." No one spoke for a few seconds. I looked at her and nodded. "No. More words needed." "What matters is you said it." Madison bowed her head, and Angela patted her shoulder, smiling. Then Angela looked at me and raised her glass. "I want to say something. To me, Caroline is a wind anchor. She doesn't pull anyone down. She keeps those around her from being blown away." I laughed softly. A wind anchor, sad and beautiful at once. "Thank you, Angela." The meal ended with kids singing off-key, clinking cutlery, and laughter filling the kitchen. There were no victims or villains anymore, only people learning to live kindly again. The next afternoon, Avery stopped by with the first installment payment from Madison. She set the envelope on the table and smiled. "It's small, but on time. Harold says this is a start to what the legal world calls restorative justice. You did what many only talk about. I smiled, taking the envelope without opening it. I don't need to know how much. I just need to know they kept their word. That evening, I posted a new photo. 2 families. Me, Ethan, Madison, Angela, and the 4 kids around the dinner table. Warm light on laughing faces. For the first time, I was in the picture, not holding the camera. My caption, "Respect warms a home, not blood." Within minutes, hundreds of comments and shares. I didn't read them all. I set the phone down, sipped tea, and looked at the image, the light gentle now, no glare, no hidden pain. I opened the envelope and saw Madison's first check. Not large enough for the electric bill, maybe a few potted plants, but the relief went to my bones. That night, moonlight spilled through my window as I closed my eyes. I knew forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it opens the door for the future to breathe. And in the steady rhythm of my own breath, I saw clearly at last I'd lived long enough to witness what I believe in. Justice isn't always a verdict. Sometimes it's just a chair saved for you at the table, almost 2. Years have passed since the night I left the house in Edgewood. My life now is small, calm, and just enough like my 3rd-floor apartment overlooking Santa Fe's Plaza, where mornings are full of sun and evenings fill with street guitars. I get up early, open the window for the breeze, make a cup of coffee, and watch the light climb the Sangre de Cristo range. Far-off church bells ring, mixing with the smell of toast from the corner cafe. My life isn't loud anymore. No sounds of anger, just the slow, gentle beat of peace. I teach a community knitting class at the city's cultural center. Older women gather every Tuesday morning, knitting and telling stories. Some are divorced, some widowed, some still learning how to forgive their children. I listen, then share my own story, not to complain, but to show that leaving at the right time is also a way to love. Madison's installment payments still arrive in my account on schedule. I add a little savings and live just right, no lack, no excess. I buy flowers every weekend and pay for the art class I always wanted to take. Freedom at this age isn't flying far, it's standing steady and quiet. Ethan still visits every Sunday. We drink coffee on the balcony and talk about baseball and how Noah is about to start middle school. Madison sometimes texts photos of new dishes. She's trying lasagna, pumpkin soup, honey-roasted chicken, no more orders, just simple sharing from someone who wants to keep a connection. Once she texted, "I remade an old dish but with less salt." Ethan says it tastes gentler, like how I'm learning to talk. I laughed and replied, "Less salt, more heart." Noah and Ellie are growing fast. They send birthday cards and video call every weekend. Sometimes they just say, "Grandma, I love you." That's all, and the whole world warms inside me. The buyback contract is still on schedule, quarter by quarter, as promised. I still keep the right to stop it if anyone forgets. Respect not to threaten, but to remind them that kindness needs boundaries. I've never had to use that right. They understand now. They know respect is the real foundation of a home. On the wall of my small apartment hangs a light wood frame, both families around a dinner table. I'm in the middle, holding a cup of tea, smiling softly. No suspicious eyes, no distance. Just a mother, a friend, a person who stepped out of the dark and found herself seen. It's the first photo I've hung without feeling my heart sink. One evening, while journaling, I wrote to myself, "Thank you, Caroline, for leaving at the right time so you could come back to yourself, for choosing self-respect over silence, for believing love requires limits." I closed the notebook and opened the window. The Santa Fe air rushed in, cool and clean, with lavender and a little desert dust. I closed my eyes and breathed deep. Freedom smells like this: wind, courage, and gratitude. I didn't destroy a family. I made them relearn how to love with limits, with gratitude, with respect. They're still a family. The difference is that now they listen, apologize, and hold on to each other with honesty. I used to be the mother pushed away from the table. Now I'm the one in the middle, listened to and called by name, not because I changed them, but because I changed how I stand. Every morning when the first light pours in, I smile again. Others might just see an old woman living alone in a small apartment, but I know I'm living in a house built of self-respect. If you're still here with me, thank you, truly. Not everyone stays to the end of a story, especially a story about soft wounds the family hurts so many of us have known. If you're hearing this now, somewhere in your heart you probably know what it feels like to be forgotten, dismissed, or to be strong when no one stood beside you. I want you to know you're not alone. Wherever you are, quiet room in New York, a small house, in Texas, or across the ocean if you're listening, I already feel accompanied. Leave me a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from, so I can imagine how far this voice has traveled and how many hearts it's touched. And if this story gave you a bit of warmth, or reminded you of the value of respect, courage, and love with boundaries, please like, comment, or subscribe. Not to count views, but so stories like this can keep being told for everyone trying to stand steady in their own storm. Because sometimes a single shared word is enough to warm a heart that's been cold for a very long time. After my husband's funeral, the house we'd lived in suddenly felt so empty it was bone cold. I thought if my only son moved back in, maybe neither of us would be so lonely. I sold the lakeside lot, gave him the money to start a business, and kept only the first floor for myself. I believed that was an act of motherly love. I didn't know it was the start of a long nightmare. One morning, my son set a paper on the table, his voice flat like a business call. $4,000 a month, Mom. If you want to stay, sign here. I thought I'd misheard. I'd given him this house. He just shrugged. It's mine now. Whoever lives here pays. I swallowed it, telling myself he was stuck and needed time. Until that night when I broke an old plate, my son slammed the table and shouted, "You broke the most expensive set! You should learn to pay for every mistake!" I bent down to pick up the porcelain shards, my hand bleeding, then quietly set an envelope with $4,000 on the table. "Here's the price. I pay for giving birth to you," I whispered. That night I left, carrying a legal secret he didn't know. I still held title to the land, and soon, the day he learned, that would be the day he understood what it really means to pay. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Nora Whitman, 65, a widow after more than 40 years of marriage. My husband Harold died of a sudden heart attack early last fall. On the day of the funeral, Ethan gripped my hand and said he would never let his mother live alone. I believed him. I believed it so much that I cleared out Harold's room, wiped every frame, and prepared the small attic for Ethan and his wife, Marissa, to move in. At first, the house was full of laughter. Marissa cooked. Ethan helped me fix the front steps. I thought maybe I still had a family, but just 2 months later, everything changed. Ethan quit his old job, said he wanted to start a business with the money I'd given him. He brought home plans, full of jargon I didn't understand, and every night he got drunk on whiskey, eyes dull like a stranger. Then, one February morning, just after I made coffee, Ethan laid a pre-printed sheet in front of me. "Mom, starting this month, rent is $4,000. I need clear rules." I froze. "Rent? Ethan, this is our home." "It's my home now," he answered, voice cold. "You signed it over to me, remember? I'm responsible for the bank, and if you stay, you have to contribute." I gripped my hands so tight the coffee cup trembled. I wanted to say I was the one who paid off the loan with Harold's insurance, but I kept quiet. I was afraid of losing my only child, afraid that an argument would shred what little we had left. I signed the paper. My signature shook like the last stroke of my faith. From that day on, I started months of nonstop work. In the morning, I swept floors at a small market on Elm Street. In the afternoon, I cleaned a retired teacher's home. At night, I washed dishes at a diner until midnight. At the end of every month, I put $4,000 in an envelope and set it on the kitchen table. Ethan never said thank you. Once, I found a wine bill in the trash for nearly $500. And me, I cut back on bone medicine and ate instant noodles twice a day just to pay rent. Marissa spoke less and less. She used to be sweet and gentle with me, but after Ethan's outbursts, she only bowed her head and avoided my eyes. I didn't blame her. I knew she was living in fear too. The night the plate broke, I was just clearing the table after dinner. The white porcelain dish with the blue rim had been a wedding gift, the only piece left from the set. I don't know why Ethan called it the most expensive set. Maybe he just needed an excuse to explode. When the shard hit the floor, the sound cracked like a gunshot. Ethan roared, his face flushed. "You broke the most expensive set." Marissa panicked. "Ethan, stop. It's just a plate." "Be quiet," he snapped, eyes sharp as a knife. "She should learn to pay for every mistake." I didn't argue. I knelt, picked up each shard, blood from my hand dotting the floor. Then I stood, pulled the still warm paycheck envelope from my pocket, and set it in front of my son. "This is this month's rent," I said, my voice hoarse. Ethan didn't look at me. He just sipped his drink and smirked. "You should be grateful I let you stay." I looked at the chair where Harold used to sit, now replaced by the shadow of a cold sun. My heart broke again, and this time there was no one left to tape it back together. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed clothes, medicine, and a folder of old documents. In it was the original land title, my name still on it, never transferred. Ethan thought I'd turned everything over to him, but in fact, I had only done a temporary power of attorney arrangement for tax purposes. I set the last envelope of $4,000 on the table next to Harold's photo. "Honey," I whispered, "I can't keep the son we were once so proud of. But don't worry, he'll learn the lesson life hasn't taught him yet." When I stepped out, the night wind swept across the porch, the smell of snow mixed with leftover alcohol. I got into the old Honda, the car Ethan said made the neighborhood look cheap, and turned the key. The headlights cut across the wet road like a sad but necessary exit. Behind me, the house lights were still on, music from the living room playing as if nothing had happened. I drove with no destination. In my bag, the phone buzzed non-stop, 38 missed calls from the same number. I didn't pick up. I didn't want to hear another false apology or order. When the dashboard clock flipped to 2:17 a.m., I pulled into a small roadside motel. The neon sign blinked, vacancy, its weak glow wheezing. The clerk looked at me, a 65-year-old woman, soaked, holding a bag and a stack of papers, and silently handed me a key. The room smelled strongly of bleach. Thin blankets scarred walls, but at least no one yelled at me there. I set my bag down, sat on the edge of the bed, turned on the phone, and stared at 38 missed calls and a flood of texts. "Where are you?" I was just angry. "Come back and we'll talk." I powered it off, pulled the battery, and looked out the window. Snow began to fall harder. Each flake landed like the sky's sigh. I pressed my palm over the cut the blood had dried, leaving a raw line. It reminded me every wound has a price, and sometimes silence is the most costly answer. I lay down, my back aching on the sagging mattress, but my heart felt lighter. For the first time in years, I didn't hold my breath at the sound of a door opening, didn't brace for insults. Only the steady rain on the eaves and the faint warmth of freedom. Before closing my eyes, I looked at the folder beside me, the bold words, "Deed of Ownership, Nora Whitman, Catching the Light." I smiled softly. Tomorrow I would call Harold's old attorney. Tomorrow I would reclaim my name not just on paper, but in my life. And Ethan, he would understand, eventually. Not everyone can sell the person who gave them life and walk away without paying. I woke when the sun was already high, light threading through the motel curtain like thin stitches. I'd slept fitfully, dreams tangled with rain and memories of the old house. In the dream, I heard Harold laugh, a sound I'd forgotten. He said, "Nora, you were never a burden. You just forgot you have the right to be at peace." I sat up and made a quick cup of instant coffee from the lobby pack. Even cheap coffee still tasted like survival. I opened my bag and took out the land title, the one thing I kept like a charm. The line, "Deed of Ownership, Nora Whitman," was clear and sharp, a reminder I hadn't lost everything. At noon, I drove the Honda out of town along Maple Street, where an old wooden sign read, "Rooms for Rent. Quiet Neighborhood." I pulled over. Inside, a 2-story brown brick building with a small yard and a few sun-leaning cacti. A middle-aged man came out, tall, a dusting of gray hair, metal frames on his glasses. Plaid shirt, notebook in hand. "I'm Luis Ortega, the landlord. Here to see a room?" I nodded, clutching my bag. "I need a quiet place, preferably long-term." "Second floor, 3B, he said, husky but kind voice. "Nothing fancy, but clean. I don't ask many questions, just pay on time, don't bother neighbors, no old gas stoves. Rent is $950 a month, minimum 6-month lease. Not negotiable." I followed him up the steps. The wooden stairs creaked. The room was small. Floors worn. A crack on the wall ran like a vein of time. But when he opened the window, the light spilled in clear, pale gold, washing over my face. I stood still. I couldn't remember the last time daylight touched me without someone yelling. "How do you like it?" Luis asked, watching carefully. I swallowed. "I'll take it. I can put down the deposit now." He raised an eyebrow, as if unsure a 65-year-old woman with messy gray hair and a worn coat could pay on the spot. Then he nodded and pulled a standard lease from his pocket. "Sign here, Whitman, right?" "Yes," I said, my hand trembling slightly as I took the pen. For the first time in years, I signed my name for myself, not for anyone else, and not as a placeholder. When he handed me the keys, the soft metal clink sounded like a new heartbeat. "Welcome to Maple Street," Luis said. "If you need anything, knock downstairs. I fix pipes and change bulbs for free." I thanked him, and when he left, I sat on the bed. The room had nothing but a thin mattress, a wobbly table, and a window facing a line of bare maples, and yet to me, it felt like a beginning. That afternoon, I drove to the thrift store on the corner of Jefferson. I picked a tulip-shaped desk lamp. Its gold paint was chipped, but when I tested it, the light was warm and soft like an old spring. I added a small pot, 2 bowls, a thin blanket, and a floral curtain that smelled of sun. Total, $42. I set them carefully on the back seat like treasure. Back in the room, the sunset spread amber across the walls. I plugged in the tulip lamp. Its gentle glow filled the space and made the old room look alive. I poured a glass of water, sat on the bed, and listened to the creaks from downstairs. The sound of ordinary life, a sound I'd forgotten. A light knock at the door. A woman around 60, gray hair in a neat bun, held a tray of bread. "I'm Ruthie Park, across the hall." She smiled. "I bake banana bread. When someone new moves in, I bring a loaf. Here, everyone lives on their own, but sometimes a slice of bread makes a person less lonely." I thanked her and invited her in, but she shook her head. "No need, Nora. On Maple Street, we respect space. Live quietly, and don't let anyone make you apologize for wanting peace. That's enough." She left the hallway scented with banana bread and simple kindness. That night I set up the room, made the bed, washed the bowls, put the pot away. Every small task felt like rebuilding a piece of dignity that had been sanded down. When the tulip lamp lit the wall, I opened my old notebook, the one where I used to track Ethan's monthly expenses. Instead of numbers, This time, I wrote 5 new rules for living. 1. No borrowing. 2. No begging. 3. No crying. 4. No debt. 5. And no apologizing for wanting peace. I taped the paper to the wall beside the tulip lamp like a vow to myself. The next morning, I made coffee in a little electric kettle. The smell filled the room. No one yelled that it was too strong or too loud too early. I sat by the window. He watched the sun touch the bare maples and felt slow and quiet. For the first time in years, I drank coffee without rushing. My phone lit up. 12 missed calls from Ethan. I hesitated, then opened voicemail. "You owe me this month." "I need money. Where are you?" "You're not allowed to leave like this." I muted the phone and set it face down. The tulip light reflected off the case, making those messages look small and meaningless. I smiled. For the first time in years, I smiled without guilt. That afternoon, I ran a few errands. The clerk at the corner store, a young woman with pink hair, said, "New here? It's safe." "We all take care of ourselves," I said. "Sounds like what I need." Back home, I saw Luis fixing a pipe in the yard. He looked up and smiled. 3B, treating you okay?" "Better than I expected," I said. "The light there makes me feel still alive." He nodded. "Light reminds people who they are. I started over in a room like that too." His words kept me quiet for a long time. That evening, I had a small bowl of soup, then washed the dishes. The light on the water rippled like time healing. I opened the window. Cold air slid in, carrying damp earth and jasmine from the yard. I sat at the table and looked around. Every object had a reason to exist. The little pot that cooks just enough for one, the tulip lamp lighting a quiet corner, the old curtain shielding the world. As I reached to turn off the light, a thin strip of hallway glow slipped under the door. Someone slid an envelope onto the floor. I opened it. "Rent received. If you need anything, knock. Luis." No chit-chat, no pity, just respect. Sometimes that's the finest kindness. I lay down, but sleep didn't come. Maybe it was too quiet. I wasn't used to it. I could hear the clock ticking, the wind nudging the wall. I got up, opened the small tin box I always kept in my cloth bag. Inside were the last ties to my old life, our wedding photo, Harold's bent gold ring, and the land deed my name on it. I ran a finger over the signature, remembering Ethan's hand signing that rental paper with me, the strong strokes of the boy I'd taught to write. A tear dropped onto the page, and I didn't wipe it. I spoke softly, to myself. This is what I still hold, and I won't let anyone take it again. The tulip lamp's light fell across the paper, the letters gleaming like breath. I folded it, put it back, and locked the box. Outside, the wind whispered through the branches. A cat padded across the eaves, feet light as a secret. I heard myself exhale long, slow, and deep. That night, I didn't dream of Harold or Ethan. I dreamed of a sunlit road with a little sign that read, Maple Street. I walked alone, and for the first time, I didn't feel lost. I never knew silence could bring so much peace. The first mornings on Maple Street drifted by like smoke. I rose early, made coffee, listened to dry maple leaves rustle at the window. No one rushed me. No one complained the coffee smelled too strong. It was just me and enough space to breathe. After 2 weeks, I decided to drop 2 of my jobs. My back's nightly ache reminded me I'm not 20 anymore. I kept only the cleaning work for 2 kind clients, a widowed piano teacher and a young couple with a new baby. They treated me with simple respect. They asked, "Are you tired?" instead of, "When will you be done?" At noon, I got home early and stopped by the little bakery on the corner. They knew my order, black coffee and a slice of banana bread. Each time I walked in, the girl at the counter smiled. "Miss Whitman, another beautiful day?" I smiled back and thought, yes, because no one is there to ruin it. One afternoon I sat by the window, sunlight spilled across the wall, and I wrote a letter by hand. I wrote to Ethan and Marissa in a calm voice, without blame. If you need to see me, you can meet me only at the Braves Public Library on Central, on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. for up to 30 minutes. No money talk, no arguing. If you truly want to talk, I will listen. If you just want to demand, let silence answer for me. I folded it, stamped it, and mailed it. Dropping the letter felt like unloading a stone from my chest. From now on, boundaries would be in my handwriting, not someone else's. The next day, Ruthie knocked. She brought 2 small plants, a pot of basil and a tomato seedling. I think you should grow something, she said. Plants keep us busy in a healthy way, and they never ask why we're quiet. We went to the little backyard. Ruthie showed me how to dig, set the seedling, and cover it up to halfway up the stem. Don't be afraid to trim roots, she said. Cut roots grow stronger. I went still. Her words stitched right through me. I'd spent a lifetime feeding roots for others, my husband, my son, and never learned to cut off the roots draining me. With soil on my hands, I felt a strange ease. The basil's scent in the sun took me back to when I thought caring for someone was the only way to be loved. Now I understood. Sometimes love begins with letting go. Early in the week, Luis knocked, his expression a little grave. "Miss Whitman," he said softly, "this morning a man came asking about the new tenant. Said he was your son." I told him everyone here has privacy. If you want, I can change your locks. I thanked him. My heart pinched. I knew it was Ethan. I could see his restless, sharp edge in my mind. Maybe he still didn't understand I was no longer obliged to answer. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote in bold red, "Anyone coercing an elder financially is committing a crime." Below it, I copied details from the Elder Financial Abuse Act I'd read when I worked at the library. I taped the page beside my 5 new rules. Side by side, they stood like 2 small shields, guarding me from the old world. 2 days later, just after I finished cleaning the retired teacher's place, there was a knock on the door at Maple Street. Luis was talking to 2 uniformed officers. He waved me down. "Miss Whitman?" the taller officer asked politely. "We got a welfare report from your son. He said you might be cognitively impaired and need a wellness check." I stood straight and steady. "Oh? Then please check." I welcomed them into my second-floor room. The tulip lamp lit a tidy table, the tomato plant on the balcony, and a small file cabinet for my papers. I pulled out the signed lease with Luis, then the land title copies. "These are my legal documents," I said evenly. "I live independently, pay rent on time, have a lease, have assets. If anyone reported me incompetent, that report is false." The officers glanced at each other and nodded. The taller one said gently, "Sorry for the trouble, ma'am. You seem more lucid than we are." After they left, Luis chuckled. "Need me to be your witness?" "I've got enough witnesses," I said, pointing to the tulip light washing across the room. Light never lies. That night, I took out the little metal box and started a keep for court file. Each envelope had the date, a description, and proof attached. I saved copies of transfers, bills, and even Ethan's messages. "Mom, I just want to help. Is someone putting ideas in your head? If you don't listen to me, you'll regret it." I printed them, clipped each page, and numbered them. Then I wrote a note. "Silence isn't weakness. It's how I get ready to speak at the right time." I put the file in the drawer and locked it. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of something. The next morning, Ruthie came over to water the plants. The smell of basil filled the hallway. "Your plant's doing well," she said. "Just don't overwater it," I laughed. "I'm learning to let it grow on its own." She nodded and stuck a little tag in the pot. "Nora, basil." By afternoon, I made tea and opened the window, listening to distant traffic. The phone rang again. 17 missed calls. I didn't pick up. I switched to silent and set it face down. Outside, the wind shook the leaves. The basil rustled like a whisper from women who used to be told to endure women who now only want peace. A week passed. I answered none of the messages and picked up none of the calls. Ethan started emailing, "I just want to help, Mom. I'm sorry." I didn't reply. I know apologies from people like him are often the opening move in another round of control. Every morning I went to work, and every night I wrote a short journal. One line for the facts, one line for feelings. Today's first line, "My son is learning to sit with the silence he created." The second line, "I'm not afraid of the phone ringing anymore." On Sunday, Luis invited Ruthie and me to dinner, pot roast and cornbread. Around the table he told stories about former tenants, someone who lost everything in a divorce, someone whose kids drained their savings, someone who just needed a place to sleep in peace. "I used to think older folks only needed love," he said. "Now I see what they need most is the right to be quiet without being treated like something's wrong." I kept silent and nodded. His words echoed in my head all night. Before bed, I opened my notebook and added one more line to the paper on the wall. "My silence is my weapon." No hurried footsteps in the hallway, no arguments, no threatening texts. Just my breath, slow and steady. I sat by the window and watched moonlight fall over the little tomato plant. The tender leaves quivered in the breeze, fragile and stubborn. I whispered, not sure if it was to the plant or to myself, "No more proving anything. Quiet living is enough." Outside, Maple Street lay still, and I, the woman whose own child charged her rent finally, found a small but mighty kind of power, the right to stay silent, and to let that silence become the strongest voice of my life. 3 weeks after I mailed the letter, I got a short text from Ethan. "Fine. Wednesday, 2 p.m. That's it. No apology, no how are you. Like scheduling a meeting." Still, I thanked God he'd at least show up, not for reconciliation, but so I could look straight at the son I once loved blindly. That day, the sky was unusually clear. Sunlight filtered through old maples and fell on the stone steps of the public library. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table by the window, where I could see the lake in the distance. I took the rule card from my bag and set it in the middle. No insults. No money. 30 minutes. Each line was in neat block letters. Steady and sure. At exactly 1:55 p.m., I saw Ethan walk in. He wore a white shirt and dark pants, with Marissa beside him. His face looked thinner. A short beard shadowed his jaw. Even indoors, he kept sunglasses on, maybe to hide the eyes that wouldn't meet mine. Marissa came behind him, arms tight around her bag, shoulders slightly hunched. I stood and gave a small nod. "Sit," I said evenly. Ethan sat and glanced at the paper on the table. "Are you playing lawyer with me now, Mom?" His voice was bitter, edged with sarcasm. I didn't answer right away. I slowly closed my notebook and looked straight at him. "No, I'm doing exactly what you taught me how to make someone pay for their mistakes." The library was so quiet I could hear the wall clock ticking. Ethan leaned back and folded his arms. "You've got it wrong," he said. "I just want to talk, not fight." "Then talk," I said. "I'm listening." Ethan took off his sunglasses. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep or alcohol, I couldn't tell. "I'm just trying to help you, but you ran off and made people think I'm a monster." "No one thinks you're a monster, Ethan," I said gently. "You chose actions that make people think that." Marissa stayed silent, eyes down. Her fingers clutched the strap of her bag. Ethan shot her a look, his voice dropping, loaded with blame. "See? You did this. You pushed her to leave." Marissa shook her head, whispering, "No, Ethan, be quiet." He snapped, loud enough that a few people turned. I set my hand on the table and kept my voice calm. "Ethan, I left because of you, because I don't recognize you anymore." "No one pushed me." He laughed, a harsh sound with no joy. I charged you rent, sure, but it was the only way to teach you reality. You can't lean on other people's feelings and responsibilities forever. You need to know the value of money. I looked at the boy who once begged me to take his picture by the Christmas tree, who once held my hand learning to ride a bike, now sitting like a creditor. The value of money? I asked softly. I worked 40 years so you could study, so you could live in the house you call yours. I don't need lessons on money's value. But I did learn something else. When love has a price tag, it isn't love anymore. He went quiet, then scoffed. You're blaming me so you don't have to admit you're weak. I held his gaze. Maybe you're right, I said slowly. I was weak to believe that enough love could stop someone from hurting me. I glanced up at the clock. 2:17 p.m. 13 minutes gone. We still have 17 if you truly want to talk. Ethan took a breath, his hands shaking. Mom, I just want you to come back. The house feels empty without you. Marissa misses you too. I looked at Marissa. She didn't speak. I could see the fear in her eyes, not of me, but of her husband. If you really missed me, I said softly, you wouldn't have turned the house into a place I had to pay to stay. If you missed me, you wouldn't use insults, call the police, or send threats. You miss a mother you think you own, not the mother who actually exists. Marissa lifted her head, lips trembling. Mrs. Whitman, I'm sorry. I nodded. You don't owe me an apology. Both of you lived in a house where no one told the truth. Ethan slapped the table. The chair scraped. You can't just leave and play the victim. I've taken care of you for years. I stayed even, never raising my voice. No, Ethan, I took care of you, and you repaid me by turning me into a tenant. The air went heavy. A copier whirred in the distance, then stopped. A child ran past. Rubber soles thudded hollow on the floor. Ethan jumped up and yanked the chair aside, banging it against the wall. Marissa flinched. What do you want? He nearly shouted. You want me on my knees? I sat still. My hands lay flat on the table. My eyes didn't leave his angry face. No, Ethan, I said quietly. I want you to take responsibility for what you've done. He froze for a beat, then shoved the chair away. The crash rippled through the library. Have you ever had to stay calm while a loved one was losing their temper? If you'd like, share a small detail your story might give someone the strength they need today. Marissa scrambled to set it upright, murmuring, I'm sorry. Ethan turned and walked out, shoulders tight. I stayed put. The librarian glanced at me, worried. I gave a small smile and shook my head. It's okay, I said. I checked the clock. 2:30 p.m. Exactly 30 minutes. I folded the rule card, slid it into my notebook, stood up, and walked out slowly. Outside, the sunlight was still honey gold. I strolled the brick path and breathed deep. By the lake, a few kids fed the ducks. I remembered when Ethan loved that, how he laughed when crumbs stuck to a duck's beak. Now that laugh lived only in memory, out of reach. I sat on a bench and opened my notebook. My hand shook a little, but the letters were clear. I wrote, For the first time, my son was angry, and I wasn't afraid. I paused and looked at the words. Each one felt like a small stitch in an old wound. And for the first time, I understand real strength. It isn't in shouting, it's in staying quiet. Back on Maple Street, Ruthie was watering the porch plants. She saw me and smiled. Did it go okay? He came, then left, I said simply. She nodded and didn't ask more. Your basil has 3 new leaves, she said softly. They know how to stand tall, even after the roots were trimmed. I looked at the pot and saw myself small and steady. Night fell. I sat alone by the window and kept writing. The tulip lamp cast warm gold over the table. My shadow climbed the wall, a thin woman, gray hair, bright eyes. I added one last line for the day. When he threw the chair, I stayed seated. Not because I was scared, but because I'm strong enough not to prove anything. I closed the notebook and set it in the drawer. Outside, Maple Street was still as paper. I heard the wind in the trees and the faint trace of basil in the air. I poured myself a cup of tea. Heat filled my palms. In the mirror, my eyes met my own, no more shaking, no more dodging. I smiled a little. For the first time in years, I knew I'd won, not with words, not with the law, but with calm. 3 days after the library meeting, I thought things would settle. Ethan disappeared from view. Marissa didn't call or text. I told myself maybe he was tired, maybe he'd begun to think. But then, on a gray afternoon in early March, just after I finished cleaning the piano teacher's place, there was a soft knock at my door on Maple Street. When I opened it, a woman around 40 stood there. Wavy brown hair, a long cream coat, polite face with tired eyes. "Are you Nora Whitman?" she asked, voice low. "I am," I said. "And you are?" She took a long breath. "I'm Emily Sutter. You don't." "I know me, but I used to date Ethan." Hearing that name Ethan, spoken by someone else, still weighed on my chest. I let her in. The room was full of late afternoon light. Basil from the porch drifted through the window. Emily sat on the edge of the chair, gripping her purse like she was gathering courage. "I came because I think you should know," she said quietly. "Your son is still doing the same things." "The same?" I asked carefully. "Conning relatives, forging signatures." "Making debts look legit," she said, then met my eyes. "Ethan's working with a man named Victor Hale. He specializes in making debt look legal with family powers of attorney." I kept silent, heart pounding. Those 2 words, power of attorney, cut like a blade through old memories. I'd signed one for Harold once, so he could make a short-term investment for our future. When it collapsed, I lost nearly all our savings. Harold cried and said it was for the family. I forgave him. And now my son was repeating it. Emily pulled a packet from her bag. "You should see this." A photocopy of a pawn slip, with a scrawl under the name Nora Whitman. That handwriting wasn't mine. "He used your name to open a secondary line of credit," she said. "He used your file as backing for a loan through Victor Hale's pawn shop. I know because I saw the original on Victor's desk. When I asked, he said, 'Ethan has the right to use that name.'" I gripped the table. The room spun for a moment. "I don't live with him anymore," I said. "I didn't sign anything. But in this system, if there's a signature, they believe it." Emily nodded. "I know. He used my name once, too. By the time I realized, it was too late. I lost almost $20,000. I looked at her, feeling both pity and fear. "Why are you helping me?" She pressed her lips together. "Because I loved him once. I believed this time will be different. But people like Ethan don't know what different means. They only repeat. I don't want to see you pulled under." I went quiet. The slanting light drew our shadows on the wall, 2 women from different generations with the same wound. "Who did Ethan learn this from?" I asked, almost to myself. Emily sighed. "Maybe from the person he admired most." I let out a tired laugh. "From his father." The words dropped like a small stone, but the echo was loud in my chest. Harold used to say, "Sometimes you have to bend the rules to survive." Ethan heard that and believed a little bend was a free pass. Emily handed me another sheet, a neat typed list with just a few lines. 4 stages of manipulation. 1. Crisis. 2. Ask for help. 3. Promise. 4. Repeat. "This came from a financial fraud support program," she said. "Ethan ran all 4 on me. You should be ready." I stared at the page, my hand trembling. "Thank you, Emily." "No thanks needed," she said. "Just don't believe anything he says when he comes back. The more pity you feel, the more you'll lose." She stood, left the papers on the table, and the room fell quiet when the door clicked shut. I sat a long time, looking at the list. Crisis. Help. Promise. Repeat. It was the chorus of my life, only this time I knew the tune by heart. I took photos of every document on my phone and saved them in a folder called Evidence Ethan. Then I opened my notebook and wrote, "He doesn't get to be called son when he turns his mother into a loan tool." My pen stopped. I closed my eyes and breathed. I suddenly thought of Ruthie. I stepped outside. She was on the porch trimming basil. "Did you know," she said without looking up, "if you cut at the right time, the basil smells stronger and lasts longer?" I watched her sure hands, the snip of the shears. "And if you cut wrong? Then it weakens and slows down," she said. "But if you're patient, it comes back, sometimes greener than before." I stayed quiet, following the scent drifting on the breeze. In that moment, I knew it was time for me to cut too. Cut the habit of rescuing. Cut the fantasy that blood alone can save everything. That night, I opened the cabinet, took out the metal box, and added the pawn copy, Emily's list, and a few prints from bank emails to a separate section. I categorized everything carefully, with dates and notes. On the lid, I stuck a new label, KEEPFORCOURT, Financial Evidence. When I pressed it down, my palms were damp, but my heartbeat was slow and steady. I wasn't the woman who shook under her son's yelling anymore. I was turning fear into action. I made tea, sat at the table, and watched the tulip lamp glow on the window. The little room felt like a cocoon, and I liked something about to emerge. Late. The phone lit up. A text from an unknown number. "Mom, I know you met Emily. Don't listen to her. You don't know the whole story." "I'll explain." I set the phone down without answering. A moment later, another message. "I'm just trying to help you get out of debt. Everything I do is for you." I looked at the screen and let out a small laugh. Crisis, help, promise, repeat. The circle had closed. I locked the phone and put it in the drawer. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt awake. The next morning, I went over to Ruthie's place. She was turning the soil for a new tomato bed. "I want to plant a few more," I said. "Maybe there's too much ground going unused." She smiled. "Do it. The better the timing of your care, the sweeter the fruit." I rolled up my sleeves and dug alongside her. The mud was ice cold, but it felt real. Every so often, Ruthie glanced up at me. "Got something on your mind?" I just said, "I'm learning how to keep my roots from spreading the wrong way." That afternoon, Luis brought mail up to me. Someone left an envelope, no name. I opened. Inside was another pawn receipt, also in my name, dated more recently. At the bottom, a scrawl, "Please don't make a scene, Mom." I held the paper, and my chest went cold. So Ethan had stepped in deeper than I thought. I sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote, "My son doesn't need saving anymore. He needs consequences." I looked at my hands, the calluses from work, the small cracks from time. I closed them into a fist. The hand that once raised and fed is now ready to cut to the root. Outside the window, the wind shook the basil leaves, and the scent filled the room sharp and clean. I breathed in, then opened the file box and arranged each piece of evidence in order. When I shut the lid, the metal clicked, dry and final, but to me, it was the sound of waking up. I knew I was entering a new phase, the kind where love steps back and justice takes the lead. And somewhere in the dark, Victor Hale, a man I hadn't met, surely had already heard the name Nora Whitman. On Monday morning, a light rain fell. I was making coffee when I heard a knock. Luis stood outside with a few more envelopes. He handed them to me with a smile. "Bank mail for you. Looks important." I dried my hands and opened one. Inside was a statement and a bold headline that made me go still. Co-signed loan notice, $42,000 US. Below it, my name, Nora Whitman, and another under co-signer, Ethan Whitman. Filed by Victor Hale. I sat down, my hands cooling. every printed letter cut like a blade. I had expected something like this, but not this fast. I flipped the page to the signature line. Under authorization of co-borrower was a shaky signature trying to imitate my handwriting. If you weren't careful, you'd think it was the real scrawl of an elderly woman with unsteady hands. I sat very still. Then I took a long breath, folded the letter, and set it neatly on the table. No tears, no rage, only absolute clarity. At noon, I went to the print shop and asked the clerk to make 3 extra copies of the statement and 1 color print. She asked softly, "Want me to highlight the dates?" "All of them," I said. "As clear as possible." After that, I drove to the bank. The service counter smelled like coffee and sanitizer. Keyboards clicked steadily. I explained, my voice even, "I'm the victim of financial fraud. My son used my name to co-sign a $42,000 loan. I did not consent. I'd like to file a fraud report and place an official credit freeze." The banker looked startled, then nodded. "Please fill out this form. We'll process it right away." I filled each box carefully and slowly, like I was writing my freedom back into place. When I reached the witness section, I paused and looked at her. "Can I have a witness sign from outside the bank?" "Of course, as long as they know you personally." I smiled. "I know just the person." That afternoon, I found Luis downstairs painting the fence. "Do you have a minute?" I asked. "Sure. What's going on?" I handed him the papers. "I need a witness. Just a signature stating I live here, I'm clear-minded, independent, and fully competent. Any signature that appears elsewhere in my name is a forgery." Luis was quiet for a few seconds, then set the paint can down. "All right. Do you have a pen?" I gave him a blue pen. He signed, wrote out Luis Ortega, address and date, then met my eyes. People can fake a signature, but they can't fake the look in someone's eyes when they've been betrayed. I nodded. "Thank you. I think this is the first time someone has stood on my side on paper." That evening, I called my sister June in Boston. Her voice shook after I finished. "Oh, Nora, I told you to keep everything in your name." "I did," I said softly, "but he learned how to game the rules just like Harold did." Silence. Then she said, "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to face them, and I need you with me." "I'll come." 3 days later, June arrived at Maple Street. She's 6 years younger than me, slim, with auburn-dyed hair. She used to be impulsive. Now she's the steady one I needed. We drove to my old house, the place I lived for 40 years, now Ethan's. On the way, June said, "I've never seen you this calm." "How else should I be?" I answered. "Anger won't make paper speak. But signatures will." When we turned down the familiar street, my chest tightened. The house looked the same, except the lawn was overgrown. The curtains were gray instead of white, and a brass plaque at the gate read, "Whitman and Hale Financial Consulting." I let out a long breath. Victor Hale, he had sunk his roots here already. June started to step out, but I held her hand. "We'll stay outside," I said. "No need to go in." She nodded and leaned against the car. I walked up the steps. Marissa opened the door. She wore a thick sweater, pale face, dark circles under her eyes. "Mrs. Whitman," she breathed, voice trembling. I didn't think you'd come. Is he home?" She nodded faintly. "In the living room, with Mr. Hale." I stepped inside. The place reeked of liquor and smoke. Papers were strewn across the table and a laptop sat open. Ethan was at the head of the table. Next to him sat a man around 50 with slicked hair, a dark suit, and eyes like glass. Had to be Victor Hale. "Well, Mrs. Nora Whitman," he smirked, "I've heard a lot about you. Please, have a seat." "I didn't come to sit," I said evenly. "I came to put the truth back on the table." Ethan stood, voice trying to sound gentle. "Mom, I can explain." I raised a hand. Don't call me Mom while you're using my name to borrow $42,000. The room froze. Marissa bowed her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. Victor leaned on the table, feigning charm. You may be misunderstanding. This is temporary and fully legal. Ethan co-signed. And you, I pulled from my bag the property deed copy and the bank fraud report. This is the only legal ownership I have, I said, laying them down. And this is what I filed at the bank yesterday. I've also frozen my credit. You cannot use my name for any loan, Mr. Hale. Victor stared, a flash of irritation in his eyes. Ethan flushed. Are you threatening to sue me, Mom? I met his gaze, calm. No, Ethan, I'm not threatening. I'm notifying. Victor let out a dry laugh. You're making a big deal of nothing. You'll make people think your son is a criminal. I shrugged. If they think that, maybe it's because he's acting like one. Marissa broke down. Ethan, please, stop, he snapped. Be quiet. Then to me, hard and flat. What do you want? I gathered the papers and put them back in my bag. I want you to understand that everything you're building on lies will collapse. I won't have to lift a finger. I turned to go, feeling Victor's stare slick, cold, inhuman on my back. At the door, I paused and spoke softly but clearly. Remember this, the law may be slow, but it always arrives, and when it does, it doesn't knock. I stepped onto the porch. A light wind moved the dry leaves at my feet. June was still there, watching me with worried, proud eyes. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Okay, more than ever. We got in the car. In the rearview mirror, I saw Ethan at the door, and Victor turning back to the table, his mouth moving. I didn't care anymore. As we left the street, the breeze slipped in through the window with the smell of fresh grass. Trees swayed in the light. For the first time in months, my hands didn't shake. June said softly, I've never seen you this strong. I smiled. It's not strength. It's just, the papers have started speaking for me. I didn't say anything else. The road stretched ahead. The sun was gentle, and I felt like I'd closed a long chapter 1 of fear, guilt, and compliance. I knew after today Victor would try to maneuver, Ethan would justify, but I wasn't the soft mother anymore. I had evidence, a witness, the truth, and most of all, myself. That night back on Maple Street, I made a mug of peppermint tea. A spring breeze nudged the curtains. I opened my notebook and wrote the day's final line, March 10th. The papers have begun to speak, and I at last have found my voice. I shut the notebook and blew out the tulip lamp. Outside, the wind kept moving softly, and for the first time I didn't shake. 3 days after I went to the old house, Ethan started calling non-stop. On Thursday morning, the phone rang for the 20th time. 6 texts stacked up on the screen. Mom, I just need until Friday. It's not what you think. Victor's pressuring me. You have to help me. I messed up. I've got no one but you now. I sat at the table, coffee gone cold, and read each line like rereading a photocopy of old years. Same words, same tone, only the name of the person he lied about had changed. I opened my notebook and wrote a single flat line. Wednesday, 2 p.m., library. No money. That's all. No explanations. I set the phone face down. I knew anyone who lives on pity always tries one more time. That afternoon, Luis knocked. He held a thick, gold-edged envelope, eyebrow raised. Mrs. Nora, someone slid this under your door while I was watering. No sender name, but the perfume smells familiar. I took it. One touch and I knew the expensive perfume Marissa liked. Inside was a wad of cash and a shaky note. I know you need this. Please don't make it hard for me. I was quiet for a few seconds, then said, Thank you, Luis. But this isn't for me. What will you do? Send it back. Like any debt that doesn't belong to me. I put the money in a new envelope, sealed it, and wrote a line, This isn't you paying, this is you ransoming your conscience. That evening, I mailed it back to Ethan's address. No further note. Back home, I stood before the little wall board where I'd written my 5 new rules. I took a pen and added a 6th. When someone shows you their math, don't solve it for them. I read the sentence over and over until my chest felt lighter. I had spent a lifetime solving for others, father, husband, son, and I was always the one who lost points. Not anymore. If Ethan created his own equation, he'd have to find his own answer. I started a new, thicker black notebook. I titled it Numbers and Truth. On the first page, I wrote, March 16th, $42,000, actor Ethan Whitman. Financial advisor, Victor Hale. I kept copying details, dates, times, emails, contents, screenshots, statements. Each number was recorded as a witness to the truth, no feelings needed, no anger required. When I finished, I leaned back and watched the tulip lamp glow on the cover. I wasn't afraid of the numbers anymore. They had once been tools to control me: rent, debts of gratitude, figures other people set to make me small. Now, they were on my side. 3 days later, I received a letter from the bank. The envelope was thick, stamped confidential in red. I opened it, my heart slow but steady. Dear Mrs. Whitman, we confirm the opening of a credit fraud investigation regarding the $42,000 transaction. All related loan activity is temporarily suspended. Representative Victor Hale. I folded the letter and placed it carefully into the KEEPFORCOURT file. No need to win fast. I just needed the truth to begin with a legal signature. That evening I checked my email. One new message from a strange address, but I knew the tone at the first line. From v.hale@hconsultfinance.com. Subject: a friendly piece of advice. Body: Mrs. Whitman, I hear you filed a fraud report. A wise move or foolish, depending on your angle. I don't mean to threaten, but I have many ways to make an elderly person look mentally unstable. If you don't want your reputation smeared, withdraw the claim. The door is still open, as long as you behave. I read every word and gave a small laugh. A man who thinks he can destroy someone's name, forgetting that a real reputation doesn't live in a bully's mouth. I took a screenshot and saved it as Threat v. Hale. Then I printed a copy, filed it, and sent another copy to the community lawyer I knew through the Women's Legal Support Group. The note I attached was short. Evidence of a threat from the subject under investigation. I, Nora Whitman, am fully competent and responsible for my actions. Send. One small click, light as a stone, lifted off my chest. The next morning, Ruthie brought over a tomato start. For you, she said with a kind smile. This one's special, plant it 2/3 deep and the roots will spread twice as far. I took it, my fingers brushing the damp soil, and felt myself settle. Why so deep? Because the stem will put out more roots, Ruthie said. The more past you bury, the stronger the plant stands. I looked up at her, my throat tight. I thought, I'm replanting myself too. By evening, I went out back with a small trowel and dug a hole. The little tomato fit in my palm, delicate, sturdy. I buried it more than halfway, tucked the soil in, and watered. The smell of fresh earth mingled with basil, a scent of beginning. When I stood, the breeze lifted my hair. I looked at my hands, once shaking while holding rent envelopes, once trimming roots with Ruthie, now muddy, firm, and strong. I went inside, opened my notebook, and wrote, March 21st. 20 calls. 6 texts. 1 cash envelope. 1 threat email. And I am still silent. Underneath, I added a slanted line, like a private reminder. When a plant starts rooting, it doesn't need anyone to explain why it's growing. That night, I put on soft music and made ginger tea. The tulip lamp washed the room in warm gold. On the table, the KEEPFORCOURT file sat tidy like the journal of someone who has learned not to step back. The phone lit up one more time, the day's last text from Ethan. "I don't want you against me. I'll lose everything if you keep this up." I set the phone down and wrote in the margin, "You lose everything not when others leave you but when you lose your character." I closed the notebook and turned off the light. Outside, rain slid over the roof, drop after drop, slow and steady, like my heartbeat. I don't know what tomorrow will be, but I know this: every collapse starts with messages like these. And when the guilty begin to beg, it means the ground under their feet has started to crack. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of young tomatoes and basil. The smell of honest life and of a woman growing roots again from her own pain. On Wednesday afternoon, the air was still, a thin veil of sunlight draped over the city. I reached the library 15 minutes early, not from eagerness, but to steady myself. I chose a seat near the window, where I could see the maples just beginning to blush red with early spring. Light fell over the page in my hands, and the lines seemed to breathe. At exactly 2 o'clock, the chair beside me was still empty. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I was about to close the book when the library door swung open. Ethan walked in. He looked nothing like the last time I saw him. Thinner, hair slick with sweat, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled shirt. In his hands was an old baseball cap, crushed out of shape. He glanced around, saw me, hesitated, then walked over. "Sorry, Mom, I'm late," he said, his voice hoarse. I nodded slightly. "It's fine. 10 minutes isn't something I keep score on with." He pulled out a chair, sat, fingers laced, index finger tapping the table. Without looking at me, he spoke softly. "I just need to borrow a little. Some gas money. I'll pay it back. I swear." I looked straight at my son's face, the one that once made me proud, now only tired and bitter. I took a pen and a blank sheet from my bag and placed them in front of him. "Right," I said gently. He looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "So you'll help?" "No," I said. "Write a plan, not a loan request. Tell me what you're going to do with your life besides asking." That stopped him cold. Then his face shifted from confusion to anger. "Are you making this hard on me?" He growled, slamming his hand on the table so hard my notebook flipped open. I closed it, my voice steady. "Hard isn't punishment, Ethan. Hard is a lesson. If you dodge the lesson, life will reteach it at a higher price." He clenched his fists, breathing fast, then shot to his feet. "You always think you're right. Always preaching while you have no idea what I'm going through." "Maybe I don't know everything," I said slowly, "but I know one thing. People who take responsibility don't need pity." He stayed quiet for a few seconds, then turned and left without looking back. I remained seated, watching his figure fade past the library's glass door. No pain, no anger. Only a long, empty space, and in that space, I was no longer falling. That night, around 8 p.m., I heard noise in the alley. I pulled the curtain and looked out. Ethan's car idled at the mouth of the lane, headlights on, but he didn't get out. He just sat there, head down, hands gripping the wheel. I didn't go outside. I turned on the tulip lamp and read by the window, like any other night. The warm light spilled onto the glass just enough for him to see me calm, clear, okay. 15 minutes later, the headlights cut. The engine's rough hum faded into the calm, dark. I closed the book and rested my chin on my hand. The light glinting on the page made me think, sometimes the best thing we can do for our children is let them see their mother is fine even if she's not by their side. The next morning, I received an email from the bank. "Dear Mrs. Whitman, the $42,000 loan has been suspended. A formal financial fraud investigation is underway. The broker, Mr. Victor Hale, has been asked to cooperate." I read it 3 times. Not to be sure, but to feel the weight of justice. It isn't loud, not dramatic like in a movie. It arrives as a line of black and white text. Yet it lets you finally exhale after months of silence. I printed the letter and taped it to the fridge. Beneath it, I added a line in red pen, "When the mask falls, don't pick it up for them." Below that, I taped an old photo. Me, Ethan at 10, and my husband on a summer trip to Oregon. All three of us laughing, sunlight on our shoulders, white shirts bright. I stared at it for a long time. Back then, I thought love could cover every mistake. Now I know, love isn't helping someone put their mask back on. In the afternoon, while I was making tea, Luis brought up the mail. "You've got a letter from Marissa." I was surprised. Marissa, my daughter-in-law who once stayed silent while her husband hurt me, had written by hand. The envelope trembled in my fingers, the ink smudged with tears. "Mrs. Nora, I'm sorry. I don't know where to begin." I was afraid of him, afraid of the anger, the control, and the lies. When you left, I thought you were weak. Turns out you were the only truly strong one. I heard Victor is under investigation. Ethan blames everyone, including me. I don't want to live in that house anymore. I'm leaving and starting over. Thank you for showing me silence isn't always losing. Marissa. I folded the letter and set it on the table. Relief spread through my chest, not triumph, but a blot. Sorrow finally put down. I took a pen and wrote a small note back to her. "Marissa, I wish you a true life owing no one, fearing no one. Let the past blow away like dust on the wind. Nora." I slipped it into an envelope and sealed it. For the first time in years, I felt myself forgive without needing to forget. That evening, I opened Numbers and Truth and added a few short lines. March 28th. Ethan came to the library, 10 minutes late. Asked to borrow gas money. I gave a pen. Not money. Left without looking back. Victor under investigation. Marissa leaving the house. At the end I wrote, "The price of waking up isn't money, it's the necessary loneliness that buys you freedom." Night fell. I sat by the window, watching the streetlight reflect on the basil leaves outside. I heard insects, the wind, and a soft quiet like an old blanket around me. No one calling, no one begging, no one owed. Only me, a 65-year-old woman learning to live light, honest, and enough. I made a cup of chamomile tea and smiled, remembering what Ruthie said that morning. If you want a plant to thrive, you have to know when to pinch back the branches. Maybe I was doing that with my life, snipping the painful limbs so the rest could live. At 11 p.m., I turned off the tulip lamp. The warm light faded slowly, leaving the room in gentle dark. I lay back and stared at the ceiling and thought, maybe tomorrow I'll wake early, make coffee, and write Ruthie about planting a few more tomatoes. A small beginning, but a real one. And somewhere out there in the dark, I believed Ethan was seeing that last glow from the lamp, not a light to guide him, just a quiet signal. His mother is okay, even if she's not waiting. A knock sounded through the still night. The first 3 taps were light, hesitant, then harder, urgent like a scared heartbeat. I opened my eyes and looked at the clock, 5:10 a.m. Outside was still dark, the path misted over. I threw on a thin scarf and stepped out. When the door opened, Ethan stood there. His shirt was damp with sweat, hair wild, face ashen, eyes lost like a child who'd wandered off. I can't control it anymore, Mom," he said, voice catching, breath ragged, shaking like he might fall. I didn't touch him, didn't hug him, didn't ask what happened. I looked straight into those eyes, the same ones that used to laugh when he was little, now 2 dark hollows. Then I spoke, slow and clear. "Take the phone, call a rehab center." He lifted his head, lips trembling. I don't have insurance, no money, no one." "Then use your real name," I cut in, placing the phone in his hand. "And start there." He stared at me, said nothing. Then he bowed to the screen. His fingers shook as he dialed. A receptionist's voice came on, warm, professional, distant. He spoke softly, in broken bits. "My name is Ethan Whitman. I need help. I have no insurance, no money, but I need." I stood still and listened to every word. Each one was a brick falling from the wall he'd built between himself and the truth. The call lasted under 3 minutes. When he hung up, he looked at me ashamed and desperate. "They said they can take me this morning, but I don't know how to get there." "My car's outside," I said. "Let's go." We drove in silence. The road was empty, the amber light stretching ahead like a thin ribbon of hope. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, hands laced, head bowed. I glanced over and remembered him at 16 sitting beside me after passing his college entrance exam, smiling so wide the morning sun looked brighter. Now, in that same seat, sat a man collapsed inside his own life. When we pulled up to Northbridge Recovery, he turned to me. "Mom, can you come in with me?" I shook my head. "No, you have to walk through that door yourself. If I go with you, you'll never learn to stand." He was quiet, eyes lowered. I unlocked the door and nodded at the white building. "Go, they're waiting." He hesitated a few seconds, then opened the door. As he walked, he staggered like someone who'd lost his map. I watched until he disappeared inside. A young nurse came out and asked me, "Ma'am, are you the patient's emergency contact?" I looked up, my voice light as a breeze. "No, put self. He is." She nodded slightly and didn't ask more. I turned away and headed for the car. The morning wind slipped through my shirt, cold to the skin, but I felt lighter. For the first time in years, I didn't have to save anyone. That afternoon, the phone rang. The nurse's voice came through, calm but warm. "Mrs. Nora, just letting you know patient Ethan Whitman is demanding to leave. He says he's not used to it and can't stand it." I drew a long breath and closed my eyes. "Thank you. But if he leaves, please tell him, don't come to my house." There was a pause on the other end. Then she said softly, "I understand. I'll note it." When I hung up, I stood still. Late light fell through the window onto the small wooden table, the same spot where I once set a rent envelope. I remembered how that felt, blood on my hand, emptiness in my chest. Now my hand still trembled, but for something else, letting go. That night the phone rang again. I hesitated, then answered. The same nurse's voice, low but kind. "Mrs. Nora, he changed his mind. He's staying. We've scheduled a 30-day program." I was quiet for a few seconds, then managed, "Thank you." After I hung up, I sat down and looked through the window where moonlight laid silver over the small pots on the porch. Then my tears fell quiet, light as mist. They dropped into the coffee I'd left half full, mixing into a taste that was bitter and warm. I didn't cry from pity or joy. I cried because maybe, finally, Ethan had hit ground, the place where no one catches you, where it's just you and your consequences. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The air was dewy, but not cold. I stepped onto the porch and made a fresh cup of coffee. Steam rose, sweet and bitter in the same breath. I touched the rim and realized last night's tears still lingered somewhere, blending with the coffee into something hard to name: pain, gentleness, truth. I looked at the tomato plant Ruthie gave me. The leaves had climbed higher, the stem firm, a deep green. I smiled some things, planted deep enough, will grow without anyone pulling. After I rinsed the cup, I grabbed a sticky note and added it to the fridge right under, "When the mask falls, don't pick it up for them." I wrote, "When someone falls, let them hit the ground before they learn to stand." I stepped back and looked at the two lines side by side, one for the people I used to save and one for me. A soft knock sounded. Ruthie came by with a bag of warm banana bread. "I hear your son checked in?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "He called himself and signed his own name." She nodded, smiling gently. "That's good. People only really change when they see themselves at the bottom. I took the bag. The smell of flour and cinnamon filled the kitchen. I still worry, Ruthie. Mothers never stop, do they? Never, she said, but worry doesn't mean you're chained. It just proves your heart still beats. We sat on the porch, ate bread, watched the morning light spread over the neighbor's roof. There was a strange peace, not because everything was fixed, but because I'd stopped trying to fix it all. That night, when I wrote in my journal, I added, April 2nd, 5:10 a.m. My son knocked on my door. I didn't open my arms, I opened the phone. I didn't rescue, I pointed the way. I paused, then wrote one last line. When someone you love calls himself the one who fell, trust that. At least he's seen the ground. I closed the notebook, stood, and stepped onto the porch. A new moon was up, the sky quiet, only insects singing. I set my hand on the tomato pot and whispered, "We're both learning how to stand, aren't we?" Then I went back inside and turned off the lights. Darkness filled the small space, but inside me, the light of clarity kept burning. 10 days after the last call from Northbridge, my phone buzzed again. A text at 6 a.m., short, plain, no pleading. I want to stay the full 30 days. Ethan. I stared at the screen for a long time. No more asks for money, no excuses. Just acceptance brief, but enough to tighten my throat. I replied with 4 words. No money, only time. Those 4 words were my way of saying, I can't save you with my wallet, but I can be here with my time and my silence. I set the phone down and opened the curtains. First light slid through the glass and touched the note on the fridge. When someone falls, let them hit the ground. I smiled. Maybe Ethan had hit it, and this time, for real. 2 days later, a thick envelope with a red stamp arrived in the mailbox. I opened it, hands slightly shaking. Dear Mrs. Whitman, after verifying signatures and records, we confirm. The signature in the $42,000 loan bearing the name Nora Whitman is forged. Liability for the loan reverts to the primary responsible party, Mr. Ethan Whitman. The broker, Mr. Victor Hale, is under criminal investigation and all financial activities are suspended. I folded the letter and leaned back. Outside, a breeze lifted the curtain to brush my arm. A pleasant chill ran along my spine, not from weather, but from the feeling of being vindicated. No applause needed, no champion to defend me. Just a piece of paper and a system that can read. 3 days later, Victor vanished. The police called with a few questions, then ended with, he withdrew all funds and isn't at his listed address. But don't worry, the fraud case stands. I simply said, I'm not worried. I just hope that someday he hits the ground too. One afternoon, while I was watering tomatoes on the porch, a car stopped out front. I looked up Ethan. He didn't look as wrecked as that morning. Shirt neat, clean shaven, still a bit tentative in his steps, but something different in his eyes, the quiet of someone who has weathered a storm. I got a weekend pass, he said, voice steady, neither forced nor begging. I came to bring you this. He opened his hand. In his palm was the key to the old house, a worn silver ring with a small tag that read, Whitman 12. I don't want it anymore, he said. That house, I'm going to sell it. I don't want to live where it's all debt and lies. I looked at the key. For years, I thought it was a symbol of motherly love. Later, it felt like my own shackles. Now resting in my hand, it was light as air. I only said, thank you. Ethan bowed his head, silent for a few seconds, then turned away. As he got into the car, I didn't add anything. I knew that sometimes love doesn't need a hug, it just needs timely silence and a nod. That evening, I set the key on the table beside my tea and the Numbers and Truth notebook. Then I wrote, April 12th. My son returned the key. I took it. Light as wind. Justice arrived. But what I saw more clearly was a person waking up. I closed the notebook, sighed, and turned on the tulip lamp. Its light washed the window frame and caught the dust in the air, the kind of light that makes an old room feel warm. The following week, the city library posted a notice, "Free class, Managing Finances After Trauma." For those who've experienced scams, financial dependence, or economic abuse. I stood at the bulletin board for a long time. A small group of middle-aged women were reading it too, whispering to each other. I smiled and tore off the little tab. In the corner that said, "Register at the main desk." That night I wrote in my notebook, "Tomorrow sign up for the class." The next morning, I went to the library. The head librarian, a woman with neatly brushed silver hair, looked at me and said, "Mrs. Nora, there's one spot left. If you want, you can take the class, or volunteer to shelve books after." "I'll do both," I replied. From that day on, every Thursday afternoon I went to the library and sat among women who'd lived through similar things, some stripped by their children, some controlled by their husbands, some simply learning how to live again. We learned how to read bank statements, fill out tax forms, and say no without feeling guilty. During the break, I shelved books, lining up the spines just so. When my fingers touched the thin dust on the covers, it felt like I was touching my old life, once clinging, once heavy, now just a light layer I could wipe away. One weekend afternoon, Ruthie and Luis called me over to the backyard. "Mrs. Nora, let's make tomato sauce," Ruthie said, holding a basket of ripe tomatoes. "I've got basil," Luis added. "The fragrance is my department." We chopped, simmered, and stirred. The scent of tomatoes, garlic, and basil floated everywhere. The three of us sat on the porch, tasting the sauce with toasted bread. Children's voices drifted over from the neighbors, lively and bright. I looked up at the sky, pale blue, peaceful. Time itself seemed to slow its breathing. Luis took a sip of wine and smiled. "You see, Mrs. Nora? Life is this simple, and that's when it tastes best." I nodded. Simple living is the finest luxury. We only need a little so long as that little is real. Ruthie laid a hand on my shoulder and said softly, "You've come a long way. Now you can rest." I smiled at the lines on my hands. "No, I'm just beginning a life where I'm in charge." That evening I went home, washed the cups and dishes, made tea, and opened the window. The scent of tomatoes and basil still clung to my hair and clothes. I looked at the old house key on the table. It still lay there, glinting under the light, like a piece of the past rinsed clean. I don't plan to go back, and I don't plan to sell in a hurry. All I know is, it's no longer a shackle. It's proof that even after losing everything, I can live again clean, enough, and free. Night fell, and I wrote the last line in my journal. April 18th, Ethan says he'll finish the 30 days of recovery. I believe it, not because of him, but because the truth has started to take root. I have a home, friends, soil to plant, and time to live. I closed the notebook and looked around the small room, the place that had witnessed tears, fear, and then renewal. Now it held only light. I spoke softly, as if to my own life. "Thank you for giving me a chance to relearn an old lesson that love doesn't mean enduring, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." Outside, the wind mingled with the sound of children laughing under the neighbor's porch. I took a deep breath, dropped my shoulders, and smiled. At last, the true son has appeared, not the Ethan of the past, but the Ethan learning how to be a man. And as for me, a mother, I've finally learned how to be a person, for myself. One early autumn morning, maple leaves started turning gold along Maple Street. When I opened the mailbox, I found a folded envelope, the paper thick, its crease precise. In the top left corner, the familiar hand, slightly slanted, a bit shaky but clear, "Ethan Whitman." I took it inside, set it on the table, poured myself a cup of coffee, and then opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, not long, about half a page, but each word made me pause and breathe. Mom, I'm not asking you to trust me right away, but I want to start over. I commit. No lying. No borrowing. No using your name for credit. I'll earn my own living and pay down every dollar of my debt. I know you don't need promises, but I need to write this to remind myself. Ethan. I folded the paper, my hand trembling slightly. Morning light crossed the window and touched the words as if to make them brighter. I read it once more and placed it beside numbers and truth. Then I picked up a pen and wrote a short reply. I accept work, not promises. It's the only way I can love my son now, through reality, not hope. The next afternoon, Ethan called. His voice was low but clear. I found a job at a repair shop near Northbridge. It's only part-time for now, but I think I can start. I heard tools clacking on the other end, the hum of an engine. He went on, almost shy. They're letting me learn maintenance. I'm better with my hands than an office. I said, good. Just do the real work. No need to rush. I'll pay the debt little by little, he said. Not just the bank, what I owe you. I didn't answer. Some debts can't be paid in money, only by living differently. A week later I got another letter, this time from Marissa. A beige envelope, neatly sealed. Her handwriting rounded and light, no longer shaky like before. Mrs. Nora, thank you for letting me go. I'm living in another city now, working as a server at a small cafe. I reread your letter whenever I feel weak. I think forgiving myself is the hardest part. Wishing peace to you and Ethan. I folded the letter, placed it in a wooden box with the old papers. It felt like a soft breeze through heavy years, closing the door without bitterness. That afternoon, Ethan stopped by. He'd just finished a shift, hands still greasy, shirt smudged. Mom, I'm sorry I went too far on the phone yesterday, he said, taking a seat. I just worry I won't make it. I didn't react. I took a pen from my bag and set it on the table in front of him. If you're worried, write a real plan. I don't hold anyone's fear for them anymore. He looked at me for a few seconds, then nodded. He picked up the pen and started writing slow, but steady. I watched that hand, the one that once signed a fake name, now writing truth. Every stroke felt like a small dot of atonement. That night, I sat at the table and read the page. Ethan wrote that he wants to train formally, earn a technician's certificate, then rent a small apartment near the shop. He'll keep making monthly payments to the bank. No long apologies. No, I promise. Just a plan. I smiled, tucked the paper into a separate folder, and made a hot cup of tea. The scent of tea blended with the lingering tomato basil from the other night, and the small home smelled gentle. The next day, I decided to buy a real wooden bed. After leaving the old house, I'd been using an air mattress, small, light, easy to fold. It made me feel temporary, like a guest in my own life. But now it was different. I wanted solidity. The delivery man helped assemble the bed while I watched the slats click into place with firm, sure sounds. When he left, I spread a white sheet, set a small pillow, and sat down. The bed didn't creak, it didn't wobble like the old air mattress. For the first time in years, I felt my back supported by something real. That afternoon, Luis came to fix the tulip lamp, the one that's been with me since I moved here. The cord was old, the bulb flickering. He opened the casing and replaced the wire, talking as he worked. It's not broken, Mrs. Nora. It just needed a new cord. The old one was overloaded, couldn't carry the current. I laughed. I guess I'm the same. Luis looked up and smiled gently. Then you're rewiring the heart cord. I said nothing more. I just nodded and watched the new light spill out. Warm, not harsh, just enough to give the room a true glow. That evening I took a small card and added it to the fridge. The words, in black pen, neat and clear. Love isn't rescue. I looked at the 3 cards stacked together. When the mask falls, don't pick it up. When someone falls, Let them hit the ground. Love isn't rescue. Those 3 lines are like 3 rungs of a ladder carrying me from fear to letting go and then to peace. That autumn night, wind slipped through the window, and the kitchen still held the faint smell of tomato sauce, the scent of something cooked, slow, simple, unpretentious, but true. I sat at the table and switched on the tulip lamp. Its light spread across the wall in soft, honey-colored patches. I opened my journal and wrote, October 2nd. My son wrote a handwritten commitment. I didn't cry, didn't shake. My heart felt still as water, like sauce after a long simmer, no longer boiling, but rich and real. I closed the notebook and looked up at the lamp's glow, warm, soft, covering the room. I realized I don't need anything more. No promises, no witnesses, just true light, real fragrance, and a life stitched back together with a new cord. I turned off the lamp, but the light stayed on inside me, like the tomato sauce scent on my hands, washed clean, yet still faintly there. The fragrance of things that once hurt, but have been cooked down by time. Winter came late that year. On the first morning of light snow, I made a cup of coffee and opened the window. No one yelled, no one told me to shut it so it won't be cold. Just wind moving through a thin curtain, carrying the smell of dried basil hanging on the shelf. The little house on Maple Street was quiet, but not lonely anymore. Ethan is different now. He finished rehab and works full-time at the repair shop. On weekends, he stops by not to ask, but to help. Today he brought a bucket of compost he made himself and said, "For your garden, I think the tomatoes need a boost." Then he bent down and fixed the wooden drawer that had been loose for ages. Neither of us said much. I poured more coffee and set a cup in front of him. The coffee's warmth mingled with the smell of fresh soil and metal, the smell of real things. No more apologies, no more lectures. Just 2 people repaying each other with honest labor. In the afternoon, after he'd gone, I sat at the table, opened my old notebook, and wrote 1 line. Timeline. The broken plate leaving Maple, the library, the center tomato season. A short string of words, yet my whole year, each word a marker. The broken plate, the start of the pain. Leaving the first act of freedom. Maple, where I began again. The library where I learned to manage myself, the center where my son began to see light, and tomato season, the season of renewal. I closed the notebook and smiled. Maybe life doesn't need exclamation points, just small dots, linked long enough to make a road. Another afternoon, while I was shelving books at the library, the librarian whispered, "Did you hear? Victor Hale was arrested in another state." I nodded, not happy, not gloating. Just normal, like rain finally falling where it should. Tessa, the woman who used to partner with him, disappeared from view and from our stories. Maybe everyone has to go quiet at some point. A week later, Ethan sent me a handwritten letter. His strokes were steadier than before, like someone who'd learned to stand firm. "Mom, what I owe you isn't money, it's the truth. Thank you for letting me hit the ground so I could learn to stand up on my own. I don't know the future, but I know I'm not going back. Ethan." I read the letter, folded it carefully, and set it beside the old paper I once taped to the fridge. "Keep yourself." Now those 2 pages lay side by side, one from a mother, one from a son, like 2 doors finally opened from the inside. On New Year's morning, I made coffee again, opened a brand new notebook, and wrote the first lines. Library garden. Soup joy regular. 5 simple words, no big plans, no grand goals. Just the small things that make me want to live one more day. I understand now freedom doesn't need drama. It needs quiet, like the warm breath of coffee in the air, like morning light touching silver hair with no one urging you to smooth it down. I put on my coat and stepped outside. Winter sun glanced off my hair, catching a little shine like fine wire. I walked slowly past the front garden, looking at the tomato plants gone dry, roots still green. I knew when spring came, they'd sprout again. So will I. On the way back, Ruthie called from her porch, "Mrs. Nora, let's make more sauce sometime." Luis just planted more basil. I smiled and nodded. Next week winter needs something red to keep it warm. When I reached my door, I looked up at the noteboard that had hung there all year. It was old now, paper yellowing, corners peeling. I didn't take it down. Every word had become part of me. When the mask falls, don't pick it up. When someone falls, let them hit the ground. Love isn't rescue. 3 lines that taught me how to love, how to let go, how to live. And I know now the door is never opened by someone else. It opens only when you're ready to step through. That night I lit the tulip lamp, the light reflected on the wall, golden as honey. I sat by the window and wrote the last line in the new notebook. First day of the year I am forgiven, not by anyone else but by myself. I closed the notebook, set down the pen, and let it be. The home smelled faintly of tomatoes. The wind outside mingled with the room's warmth. I closed my eyes, my heart light, not because everything was perfect, but because I no longer feel I have to be. And if you're still here, listening to the very last lines of this story, thank you. Not because you finished it, but because you stayed with yourself. If someday you have to choose between love and peace, I hope you're brave enough to choose peace. Because love can sometimes make us lose our way, while peace will lead us home. I don't know where you're listening from, a far-off city or your own small kitchen, but if you're quietly smiling, leave me one simple line. I'm still here, so I'll know that even when the world is loud, there are souls breathing slowly with me. And if you want to keep going with me to hear more about standing back up, forgiving, and the quiet seasons after the storms, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. So each evening, when I turn on the tulip lamp to tell a story, you'll sit with me again, 2 old friends, sharing a cup of tea, a deep breath, and a story just long enough to heal.